fair as a manager. Like we said in previous shows, sporting directors should be coming on and doing press. You're the one bringing in the players. The manager's doing the best they can with these players. They might have wanted 10 other players that you have said no to. Some of the players that they brought in Nottingham Forest, Douglas Luiz on loan didn't work. Zinchenko on loan didn't work. Amari Hutchinson, 37.5 million. Only one Premier League goal in 22 appearances. McAtee, 30 million. Hasn't worked. Ndoye hasn't worked. Bakwa hasn't worked.
Tyson Fury, Floyd Mayweather, Canelo Alvarez. Just hearing these names makes you think money and the hundreds of millions of dollars, pounds or Saudi riyals in boxing. But that's at the top. At the bottom, it isn't quite the same. Even for those on the rise, there's not an awful lot of cash in the boxing world. And if you're just starting out, well, it can be a very costly exercise indeed. But don't take my word for it. Here's the former European champion, TalkSport's Spencer Oliver.
You're turning professional and you're boxing, let's say, York Hall on a non-televised fight. You have to sell tickets to earn any money, but you have to cover the wages of your opponent as well. So if you don't have the ability to be able to sell enough tickets, you effectively have to pay to fight.
A far cry then from Jake Paul facing Mike Tyson in 2024, when the purse was reported to be around £48 million. But the vast amounts of cash lining the top dog's pockets isn't the norm in a typical fight.
Let's say you're lucky and you get between 5 and 10 grand. You're going to get 10 grand max for that. 10% goes to the trainer, 25% goes to the manager. Then we've got the tax man to pay as well. So we're cutting that money in at least half. So now you've got 5 grand for a 10-week camp. So you're talking about a guy here earning, he might be clearing 500 quid a week. How do you support a family on that? So boxers chase the dream. And, you know, there's probably 2% of them that actually make it.
So say you do make it and you start to rise up the ranks. Strikers Boxing, a training academy, says the mid-tier fighters can earn more, somewhere between £10,000 and £50,000 a fight, depending on record, profile, opponent and popularity of weight class. It's only at the top level does the real cash start flowing in, with the top-tier professionals, i.e. those going for titles, earning 6 figures a fight. Something else you'll have heard of is the terms prize fighter or journeyman. A prize fighter is, as it sounds, someone who picks up fights where they can and gets a nice big check if they win. Journeymen are the fighters who take on up-and-comers, effectively used for experience in the ring. Even if they're going up against the real prospects, a young Anthony Joshua, for example.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Trans-Europe Express. My goodness, the Sunday nights come round quicker and quicker as we get into this, the heel of the hunt, as we might say in this part of the world, where the road meets the rubber in European football. I'm Danny Kelly. For the next 3 hours, I'm going to say joined by, but actually I mean led by European football expert guru and my great friend Andy Brassell. During that time, we'll bring you all the top stories from across the continent, some of them quite mad this week. We'll have Mbappe watch, we'll preview the Champions League round of 16, 6 English clubs among the 16 who have made it through. The Europa League and the Conference League will feature as well. Tim Vickery will join us from South America, and we'll be starting the first of our World Cup countdown features as we're now less than 100 days away from the start of the greatest tournament in the world that isn't the Olympic Games, and I still think the World Cup's better. Of course it is. Welcome one, welcome all to Trans-Europe Express. Now, Andy, I've got some news for you. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Really, really good. So, yesterday, I was at a petrol station in a place called Paulstown in County Kilkenny, and I was filling up my car, And for the first time ever since I moved to Ireland, a guy pulled up alongside me, a younger, a man in his late 20s, I would say, beeped very loudly and shouted out the window of his car, "Oi!" I won't do his accent. "Danny, I love Trans Euro Express." Now, it's really odd because I get loads of validation for the view from the lane, but this was a Trans Euro Express, as he called it, in actual transit in Paulstown. I was really, I was putting the petrol into the car, otherwise I'd have run across and kissed him. I was so excited. Yeah. So that's good. Of course, you get recognised all the time because you're always on TV, yeah?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to start today, everybody, and we'll get through all the stories. We're going to start, though, because just when you think it's all over, as they say, in France, it is not. And that's why our headline for this first section is Lens's Great Week, because Lens, who you could be forgiven, they could be forgiven for slightly fading off the pace in France, as we thought it might be. They've had just the most sensational 4 days, Andy.
Yeah, they have. And it goes back to Thursday in the Coupe de France quarter-final away at Lyon, two of the bigger sides in the context of this French league season. They took a 2-goal lead, were pegged back in the last couple of seconds of that game, but won away at Lyon on penalties, which took them through to a Coupe de France semi-final at home, because you don't have neutral grounds on semi-finals in the Coupe de France. At home against Toulouse, who knocked out Marseille, but still they're the big favourites for that, and a real chance of a trophy now in a competition that PSG, Lyon, Marseille, Rennes have all been knocked out of. And then with PSG losing on Friday night, perhaps surprisingly against Monaco, Lens did their bit today. They won 3-0 against Metz, the bottom team, which you would expect, closing them to within 1 point of the top. It is all on. A double is genuinely possible.
Wow. Well, you can tell me about that and about the recruitment they've done and all the rest of it. But at the back of all of this, I know, because you hold him in, sorry, I don't want to sound like a lawyer, in the utmost esteem, is their coach Pierre Saj, who other clubs in France might be regretting getting rid of now, Andy.
Yeah, particularly Lyon, I think it's fair to say. Not that Paulo Fonseca overall hasn't done a decent job.
No, he's done pretty well, but Saj has done spectacularly at Lens, yeah.
Yeah, this was a guy who came out of the Lyon Academy to take on a Lyon side, if we go back a couple of seasons, that had taken 7 points from the first 14 games. And in the same season, took them into Europe. And he was really sacked on a sort of mini average run of form on the whim of John Textor, who really said on the way out in a really quite appalling way that you should be thanking me for giving you the chance in the first place. Well, of course, he's far too classy to have made a comeback on that, Pierre Saj. But of course, other clubs were interested. In the end, it turned out to be Lens who took him after they lost Will Still. And he has taken them. You thought Will Still was doing a decent job at the time, because he took him to 8th last season, despite the fact he had players sold out from under him. With, I guess, a team that on paper is not much different to that, even though there have been a couple of changes, which we'll come to in a minute. Pierre Saj has had them up at the top of the table all season, playing really interesting football. And he just gets that bit more out of players. You know, he's a guy in his late 40s who's really sort of unheralded. And it turns out it wasn't a fluke at Lyon. And he didn't do it just because it was his club. And he talked about how emotional it was going back there this week. But of course, did his job, got his team through. And really, I think he's a rare coach and a rare head coach who doesn't talk about himself and his philosophy constantly. You know, we don't really get a lot of those in the game. And he's just really someone who empowers his players to get on and do a great job. Now, I think part of what's gone right for them as well is the sporting director, Jean-Louis Lecker, who used to be Lens goalkeeper, who is really a rookie sporting director, even more so than you could say Pierre Saj is a rookie first-team head coach. And yet he's found a way, when they've got a limited budget, to say the least, to get on board guys who have gone a bit awry elsewhere. So you look at Matthias Udol, the left wing back, who's been brilliant. But also, I guess the headliners have been Florian Thauvin. They were able to sign Amadou Hadara in winter as well. And on top of that, they were able to get Alain Saint-Maximin just before the close of business. These sort of little deals from guys that you know have got the talent and that you know Pierre Saj can drag that bit extra out of. I mean, you just look at Thauvin, who got recalled to the French squad 6.5 years later, and looked the part as well. He's really looked the part.
I mean, this is the issue in France, I think, Andy. It is a proven finishing school for talent. I mean, you only have to look at the players who start in France, end up in the Premier League and elsewhere, but particularly the Premier League, to see what a great finishing school it is. But what it seems to me that they've done at Lens, and this is down to, as you say, their recruitment, they've combined bringing through young players in that tough physical league with, as you say, people who you've heard of but haven't necessarily been fulfilling their potential in the last little while. And the combination of that and a coach who knows how to get them going, and I mean both tactically as well as mentally, is proving, if not lethal, then certainly very, very problematic for PSG.
Yeah, and already, like, before we get to the title bit, I think it looks almost impossible that they won't qualify for the Champions League next season.
Amazing.
The season before last, they were in the Champions League, and I know Arsenal fans who went there, and of course Arsenal didn't get a positive result there at the time. A lot of Arsenal fans I spoke to who went to that game were absolutely blown away by the atmosphere at the Bodo. It's one of the most atmospheric stadiums in France. And, you know, we don't think of France as a particularly passionate football country. We might think of them as a producer of great football, great footballers, great football moments, and, you know, a really great breeding ground for talent, as you were saying. But I think from a passion side, we don't think of it as being up there with England or Germany or the Netherlands or you know, the old grands of Eastern Europe.
Yes.
But actually, there are a few notable exceptions, and that's Marseille, that's Saint-Etienne, and that's Lens. You know, working class towns, and in the case of Saint-Etienne and Lens, coal mining regions from way back when, which, you know, have endured some rough times in recent decades. And everyone comes together there and makes something really special. They will be a great re-addition to the Champions League, and with the right coach, who's saying they couldn't make a dent in it as well.
Yeah, and a reasonably handy trip for people coming from, say, England, when England qualify 9 teams for the Champions League next year, you know, whatever.
Eurostar,
Andy,
here we come.
Yes, absolutely. Andy, tell us, there are 3 games going on tonight. I suppose there's one in Portugal as well that won't kick off till after midnight. But tell us about the games in Italy, Spain and France. For what it's worth, I've got the game in Spain on, and Javi Guerrera has just equalised for Valencia. Valencia won, Alaves won. In that battle, the winner of that game will probably say, that's us free of the relegation threat. That's because they're 15th and 16th respectively. They'll be opening up a decent gap. It's 1-1. What about in Milan, Andy?
Yeah, well, that's the big one. Of course, Inter 10 points clear at the top, playing second place Milan. But, of course, Inter never beat Milan. They didn't beat them in 5 attempts last season. They lost to them earlier this season, and they're not beating them after 65 minutes at San Siro. It's Milan 1, Inter 0 in that game as well. Absolutely huge as stands. It was 1-0 at half time as well. And Inter knocking on the door, but Milan looking quite nifty on the break too. So
maybe Inter are saving themselves for the Champions League.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. But anyway, Pervis
Estupiñán
scored a very nice goal to former Brighton and Watford player to put them in front. It's currently a bit of a shock in France. Lyon 0, Paris FC 1. Of course, Paris FC just got themselves a new coach. The French Sam Allardyce in Antoine Kombouaré, heading for the second successive win as stands. Yeah, Martial Munetzi against the run of play has opened the scoring, initially disallowed, but he was found to be onside after checking. Now, Lyon have been looking a bit leggy recently, rested a lot of their players, and, they're in trouble, so they're having to bring them off the bench. And so we've had Tolisso and Endrick come on, having not started the game.
Okay, let me just tell you about our poll tonight with six English teams through to the last 16 of the Champions League games, many of them which you can hear on TalkSport, happening on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Our poll is simple. Which English team is most likely to be eliminated from the Champions League in the last 16? Is it Spurs, ... Chelsea, Newcastle or other? Spurs, Chelsea, Newcastle are the most likely to be eliminated from the Champions League in this round. You can vote on X/Twitter at TalkSport, of course, at TalkSport, at Danny Kelly Words, or at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's. Go and vote in that poll now. To that gentleman who shouted out to me from his car in Paulstown, and I threatened to go and give him a kiss. Any of you, if you see me wandering around the countryside in Ireland and you like the programme, definitely say hello, and I promise not to kiss you.
So it makes it more interesting, I think, Simon, for fans of other clubs. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
If it was all to finish today and this was in operation now,
you'd go way down to 17th of Norwich in the league with a chance to get into the 8th spot. That's what you do.
Right.
You take 60. You take
it opens up. Yeah.
You take 66% of the league as it sits now. 18 clubs in this league could have a reasonable shout to make a claim for getting 8th spot, because there's 11 games to go in the conventional season. There's 6 points between Derby in 8th and Norwich in 17th.
Right.
And those games, and when you get running at the business end of a season, it really does change the dynamics of how people play. All of a sudden, you've got 66% of the league having something involved. Then you've got the other 25%, or 35%, sorry, sort of going to the Gabby Bongle arithmetic school, the other 34%, which would be fighting for not staying in the division. So you've got constant jeopardy in a league, which actually reminded me when I was over in America looking at the MLS and how they construct their leagues and how many teams get an opportunity to play in their playoffs and participate in outcomes for themselves. They have something like 60 or 70% of the teams in a league any given season that could feature in a playoff scenario.
Right.
So it's all
Does
about...
it affect the quality? There's a message coming through there. You're telling me that 8th could end up going to the Premier League. Surely, that ain't good in terms of the quality of the club that's going to go up.
Well, there's nip and tuck. More often than not, when you finish 6th in the league, and we went up as a team that finished 6th,
Time now to talk about Germany. My headline is Wolfsburg go Tottenham. We'll talk about that a little later, Andy. We should start, as we so often do, with Bayern Munich, and it was kind of no Harry Kane, who's got a slight knock, I think. I'm not sure the exact nature of his injury. Perhaps you can update me. No Harry Kane, no problem for Bayern Munich.
Yeah, he's expected to play this week in the Champions League against Atalanta. But, he pulled up in training this week, and Vincent Kompany was straight away, you're not playing on Friday. And it's something that we kind of flagged before. Now, look, there's no reason to dispute the diagnosis or that whether Kane's genuinely injured. He is genuinely injured, but I'm guessing if it had been a huge game rather than a game when you're 11 points clear at the top of the table against Borussia Mönchengladbach at home on a Friday night, then Kane would have played. But there was no need for him to. And when we were talking about Kane's possibility of matching or beating the record of Robert Lewandowski for goals in a single Bundesliga season, we did sort of caveat it, didn't we, with he might not play all the remaining 10 games. And
even if he wasn't injured, there's a real possibility that Vincent Kompany will just stand him down, much as Harry hates that.
Yeah, just to be on the safe side. Now, of course, there's a balance between rest and rhythm, isn't there? But look, they've also got a lot of wiggle room with Nicholas Jackson, because he's not played enough for them to be in any danger of actioning the obligation to buy, because they're not going to be paying 65 million euros to Chelsea at the end of the season for Nicholas
Jackson.
Chelsea
Be livid. They love a deal like that. They'll be livid.
they would. But Nicholas Jackson came in, played really well. Set up the opener for Luis Diaz, was involved in one of the other goals, won the penalty and got the sending off for the foul on him by Rocco Wrights, and then scored the fourth goal later on. So he was involved quite nicely. The other injury news from that is that Manuel Neuer had to come off at half time. Now, not the first time that he's had to come off during a game this season. Same problem as before, calf problem. Now, of course, he's due to speak to Bayern at the end of the season, having turned 40, about extending his contract. There is increasing speculation in Germany that maybe Neuer will call it a day. Now, look, I think it's way too soon to say that at the moment, but it's just that sense that, you know, he wants to keep going as long as he feels his body can do. Now, since he had that skiing accident going back a couple of years, he has had a lot more niggles, which you kind of expect with age as well. But I think there is a discussion to be had, certainly. I mean, he'd already ruled out putting himself forward for Germany for the World Cup.
Yeah,
we know Neuer is brilliant on his day still, but you know, we're talking about Bayern go into a season playing almost every game. He's clearly not in a position to do that anymore. And the fact that they've got Jonas Urbig, who is a increasingly good and competent replacement, is very, very important as well. But yeah, a little question mark over whether he continues next season.
Yes, Dortmund won at Cologne, but you know, as their challenge for the Bundesliga has dropped away, Andy, a lot of attention has turned to what they're going to do for next season, and I guess an indicator of the kind of clear out that they might be anticipating is given to us by the news that Julian Brandt, who's a legend there, of course, will be leaving when his contract ends in June.
Yeah, Lars Ricken confirmed that at the end of the game when he was talking to Sky. And some people slightly surprised by that. But I think there's just been a sense that he has played 298 games and been a big player for Dortmund over the years. But there have been good bits and less good bits. We know he plays like a prince on his day. But is his day often enough, especially at 8 million a year?
You could argue that about Dortmund. He is an exact replica of, a reflection of the team he plays for.
Yeah, symptom of the issues that they have, I think it's fair to say. And I think you have to look at key players when you look at their issues that really endure under a load of different coaches. And yeah, that's where they are at the moment. We know Niklas Süle's going at the end of the season. Emre Can will get an extended contract despite doing his ACL, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll be a starter when he comes back in November or December or whenever it is. Karim Adeyemi is another possibility. We don't know if Nico Schlotterbeck is going to sign an extended contract. Now, they really, really want to hold on to him. So, look, there are a lot of questions for them going forward. They want to get younger. Niko Kovac, who will be the coach next season, barring a massive accident, will be the coach again next season and will want to shape a more athletic and durable team. And they are in this quite mid-stage rebuild at the moment, with probably a bit more pain to come. At least we know they're qualifying for the Champions League because, of course, they're 11 behind Bayern, as you said. They didn't play particularly well at Köln, I thought, yesterday, and certainly the Köln stadium announcer had his bits to say about that.
We'll come on to him.
As well. Yeah, but you know, it was a typically stodgy performance, but they're sixth clear of third as well, so they're in a good position as far as that goes. And Kovac has given that to them.
Yes, well, look, I would have wanted, except I've already got a really good Star of the Week. I would have given Star of the Week to the stadium announcer in Cologne. Tell us what he got up to, Andy.
Yeah, so Michael Trippel, he had two things to say, really. Firstly, when Jemai Simpson-Pusey, the young English centre-back for Köln, was sent off in the first half after VAR review, he said on the mic that he thought it was disgusting. And then this is over the stadium mic. And then towards the end, when Dortmund didn't concede a penalty for what looked like a handball by Jan Koto, he said that, this is, people could at least have a look at it, and went on a bit of a rage. So this is completely against every rule in the DFL rule book, obviously. Look, he's 71 years old. He's not going to change, is he? But I think he's probably due a telling off tomorrow morning.
Okay. Well, and if Mr. Treffel had a slightly chaotic day at the office, nothing compared to what's happening at Wolfsburg, who, as I say, are doing their best to turn into the Tottenham of Germany. And a few sackings, which were announced this morning, coming immediately after the loss to Hamburg at home yesterday. And yes, Luka Vuskovic did score, just in case you were going to ask. Mm-hmm. It turns out that he can play centre-back when Romero plays up front in the Champo next season, I suppose. But look, I think you look at what's happened at Wolfsburg, and it's even more profound in a way than what's happened at Tottenham. This is a team that was champions in 2009, regular Champions League qualifiers, still have the fifth biggest budget in the Bundesliga, and there they are, second from bottom, and with all the results today as well, they're 4 points adrift of third bottom, and that really matters because that's the relegation playoff place. That's Reprieve Central, and they're away from that. So this morning they announced that they'd sacked the coach, Daniel Bauer, and also the sporting director, Peter Christensen. It was thought that it might be happening for a while, and you wonder if they've left it a little bit too late. But they've brought back Dieter Hecking, who of course won the DFB Pokal with them in 2015 and has established a bit of a reputation as a relegation fighter since. But of course, when he got them to, he inherited a team that was in bad nick in 2012 when he originally took the job, won the cup, as we said, in 2015, but they did have Kevin De Bruyne in the team. So yes, it was a little bit different then. Whereas now it's, latter stage Christian Eriksen. And when you get to the point where he's one of your better players. Look, this wasn't a team built, a little bit like Spurs, I suppose, was not a team built to fight relegation, which is one of the major issues. And they're going to have to motor like anything to get themselves out of this. Yeah, but there'd be a huge drop into Bundesliga 2. My star of the week is a teenage striker called Christian Kafane. He's playing for Leverkusen because the excellent Patrick Schick is injured. And Christian scored the winner at Hamburg on Wednesday night. And then, in a 3-3 draw this weekend against Freiburg, got a goal and an assist. So he's really helping Bayer Leverkusen overcome the lack of Schick. So he's my star of the week. Who is yours, Andy?
Well, I think I want to try and cheer up Union Berlin, Danny. I mean, they went a goal up against Werder Bremen this afternoon, and then they went down to 10 men less than 60 seconds later, which precipitated a 4-1 defeat, second successive win for Werder, which has put Wolfsburg in worse trouble at the bottom of the table. But their penalty to put them 1-0 up was scored by Derek Kuhn, who used to play for Werder Bremen. None of this, clasping hands, raising his hand, saying, "I'm really sorry I scored against you because I used to play for you." He scored the goal and then went off, punched the air and did a dance around the corner flag. Now, look, he wasn't going to know how it was going to turn out, obviously, and maybe some Werder Bremen people thought, oh, okay, one in the eye for you after you showed off a bit. But like all these people saying, oh, God, I apologise for scoring in a football match. Come on, man. It's good to see him do that.
Oh, yeah, I've never really got that. People have moved on. All right, if you've been at the club for 10 years and you come back and, let's say Harry Kane scores the winner against Spurs in the Champions League final in three months' time. You can appreciate that he might want to just turn to me in the crowd and go, "Dan, sorry, mate." But normally, these are people paying you, they're professionals, and they go, and as long as they don't make it a mockery of the opposition, I think it's perfectly okay. Next up, we've already talked about Lens and their brilliant week. Let's talk about how PSG and others have responded, because it's to France that we'll be looking next.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The football club. It's unbelievable. The people in charge of this football club. One of the biggest clubs in the world. And an absolute mockery. We're a mockery of a football club that we've allowed this to happen.
Are you going down?
And the fans have had to accept it.
You're going down.
Jace, shut up. Don't ask me again. Seriously. Like, I'm trying to do a show here. I'm trying to have a say. And you're going to sit there and just try and mug me off for 2 hours. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it.
That's a question. No problem with me. It's not my fault you got beat tonight, is it? I wasn't playing centre-half.
It's so bad.
There's no point up, Jake. Don't have a pop at me, mate, right?
I'll have a pop at you if you're trying to mug me off.
No, I'm not mugging you off. I'm asking you. It's a simple question. Are you going down? Are you?
I can't do 2 hours with you, Jace, if you're just going to be an idiot. I mean, how can I take you seriously? You've got an Ange mask on and a clown mask.
What about 3 hours?
I can't do 2 hours of calls with you. I can't do it. I can't do it. Just please.
It's not my fault. You're rubbish.
Please, for me, don't ask me that question again. All right, just because.
What question?
All right, look. I want to hear from Spurs fans. It's obviously a shocking. I'm genuinely crestfallen. Genuinely crestfallen. It's the worst I've ever felt.
Do you think you're going down? No, it's a different question this time.
Well, how's it a different question?
I said, are you going down? Or do you think you're going down? Do you think you're going down?
Yeah, let me just remind you as well that breakfast kickstarts a huge week at the Cheltenham Festival tomorrow from 6 a.m. as Alan Brazil, Ray Parlour and Andy Townsend will be joined by a host of guests live from the O'Neill Racing at Jackdaws Castle. And that's breakfast with Alan Brazil, Ray Parlour and Andy Townsend at 6 a.m. live from Cheltenham. You do not want to miss that. And it takes us then to France. Now, we start the programme talking about Lens and the spectacular season they're having and threaten to have in the remainder of the season. That would have meant very little if Paris Saint-Germain had won again to maintain their 4-point gap, but beaten for the second time this season by improving Monaco. And I've got to say, Andy, if you do the league double over PSG, I think that Monaco should be given the title today.
Well, it's funny
Friday night. They should have got it Friday night on the pitch.
Yeah, they should have. Well, they just could have taken it home from them because it was in the stadium already,
handy,
right?
wasn't it? Yeah,
it would have been pretty straightforward. But look, I think it's amazing, really, because everything that's happened, almost everything that's happened between those two games, the one in November at the Stade Louis II that was won when, believe it or not, Paul Pogba played the last couple of minutes. That's how long ago it was. And this game here has been negative for Monaco, or up until the last couple of weeks anyway. And really, they got their rewards for what they maybe should have got a bit more of in the Champions League playoff, because, of course, remember, they played a huge part of that first leg with 10 men when they'd led 2-0. They led at the Parc des Princes in the second leg as well. And again, a red card really cost them in the second half of that. And as PSG flag a little bit, Monaco really looked the part. And funnily enough, they've looked so far off it for a lot of this season. It's remarkable, really, to see them sort of revive. And we've had that at Rennes as well. Lille twitching a little bit. They only drew today. But Monaco getting themselves into a position where they really could potentially qualify for Europe. But PSG, all of a sudden, look quite knackered. Whisper it, as we'll talk about now. Look, this was always going to happen to them at various points during this season. There's no doubt about that, because we know how much football they've played. But managing their resources is a super difficult job for Luis Enrique. Very, very tough indeed. And we've got a title race all of a sudden, which when the gap accentuated to 4 points between PSG and Lens, I think most people thought, oh, well, they've had their fun, but it's all over really, isn't it?
Let me just tell you, Andy, there's been an important goal in Spain. Lucas Boye has got a second for Alaves. So it's now Valencia 1, Alaves 2. I don't want to go over the top, oh, it's a critical goal and all the rest of it. But I still maintain that if Alaves get these 3 points, they can start to look up rather than down. They'll be, I think, pretty much safe from relegation. Whereas Valencia will once again have to just keep a slight eye on the rear view mirror. Lucas Boye, a header that less seasoned commentators than myself would describe as towering, has made it 2-1 to Alaves. So behind PSG and Lens, Marseille have moved into third place, Andy, with a win on Saturday night at Toulouse. But that didn't, I was going to say that didn't satisfy the Marseille fans, but I could say that after every time we ever talk about them.
No, well, of course, they were thinking after that brilliant win against Lyon last week that they were up and away again. They went out of the cup on penalties to Toulouse during the week, and the fans were furious. Like it's a trophy they haven't won since 1989. PSG are out of it already, as we were saying previously when we were talking about Lens. So a great opportunity for them to win something. And then they retook third place, a third place that it looks like they're going to hang on to, with Lyon heading towards defeat against Paris FC. That's into stoppage time and still 1-0 to PFC as stands. And yet there were some banners that kind of dissuaded the players from celebrating in front of their fans after they scored. Mason Greenwood getting the goal, and them seeing it out relatively comfortably in the end. So
the banners were downright rude, Andy. Let's be straight about this.
Oh,
they said that the players were pieces of, and the next word begins with M and rhymes with herd.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Herd.
Yes.
It was pretty. It was even my O level. God, do people don't do O levels anymore? Even my GCSE French could see that was a pretty rude banner to be parading in front of, players that turned out to be victorious.
With that in mind, you should probably apologise for the banner, Danny. But actually, we've got a goal in France right at the end of that game. Penalty to Lyon, scored by Corentin Tolisso. A couple of minutes to go in stoppage time. Lyon 1, PFC 1. But as we say, as stands at the moment, Marseille going to hang on to that third place for the rest of the weekend.
Speaking of unhappy fans, Nantes, huge club, champions this century. You'll tell me the exact year, Andy.
2001.
But in big trouble now.
Yeah, they really are, Danny. And, they're looking at a potential managerial change as well. But where they are at the moment, they're second bottom in the league. Only 17 points from 25 games so far. They lost at home to Angers, a team with a much smaller budget than them, who are much more comfortable in the league this weekend. But already there were protests because of everything that's gone wrong in recent months. And a lot of protests against Valdemar Kita, the very controversial president, and protests actually against something our French correspondent Lee Davey was talking about recently, the fact that even though Nantes changed their game against PSG, so PSG could have a clearer run ahead of Chelsea in the Champions League. A lot of Nantes fans not happy with that, because that maybe doesn't suit them in terms of their league campaign. It's going to make their campaign more and more congested. So a question about whether that's really the right thing for them, and the banners accusing them of really creeping and cronying to PSG at the expense of their own club, and people very unhappy.
A wider question about French football, which you're such an expert on. We heard about Nantes. You've just been talking about them. Nice is another example. Does the chaos surrounding TV deals mean that clubs that we think are deeply established in the top level in France are a couple of bad appointments or a bad run of form away from calamity?
Maybe, Danny, but I think in the case of Nantes and Nice, it's different. I think we're talking about death by 1,000 cuts, really. Nantes have been not well managed, not well looked after for a number of years. And they are a huge club, by the way, very passionately supported. We were talking about, we don't think of football passion as being something that's archetypally French, but they're really well followed there in the west of France. And Nice, what has happened to them under Ineos in recent years is just really sad, really sad. And they could be in the position, I think, they're not going to go down this season because there's too much of a gap. I'd love to read a table, so I'm going to read you the bottom of the table, especially as that game has just finished. Lyon won, Paris FC won. So Paris FC in 13th place, they've got 30 points. Le Havre 26, Nice 24, and then the playoff position, there's a bit of a gap to that, 16th. Auxerre, another relatively recent champion, 25 years ago, 19 points. Nantes in the bottom two with 17, and Metz with 13. So, yeah, you're looking at some, as you say, huge clubs there, but really, there has to be, I guess, a spirit of invention. As I say, Angers are a really good example of what you can do with very little money. By far the lowest budget in the division, comfortably in mid-table.
Yeah, and it helps, of course, that the expectations are tempered by the presence of PSG. So you might as well go for it, properly. No one's expecting to win the title. But you are expected to compete with the rest of the league. Who's your star of the week in France, Andy?
My star of the week is going to be from the Lyon Paris FC game. Young Matondo, 17 years old, had the shot that was saved, and Marcel Monetzi, who's my star of the week, putting in the goal that so nearly gave them a second win out of 2 under Antoine Camboire.
Yeah, my star of the week has added another nail into that coffin that Nice are busily constructing for themselves. It's Sebastian Szymanski, excellent Polish midfielder, signed by Rennes in the recent transfer window from Fenerbahce in Turkey. He got his first goal for the club in a 4-0 whacking of Nice. And as you just pointed out there, Nice may not go down this year, but they're in trouble. And as certain huge clubs prove, you keep circling the drain, sooner or later it's glug, 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 glug.
I've got lots of Tottenham mates, and mate, they're devastated. They can't watch. They said I couldn't watch it last night. I'm not going to watch it. I can't watch it.
Seriously?
Yeah, they're getting to a stage where they're so nervous about going down, which I thought about 3 weeks ago. Oh, they'd be fine.
So did I, mate.
Now, with what I've seen from Forest, what I've seen from West Ham, they're banging it.
Right, I'm the same as you, mate, and I bet you.
Leeds will be looking. Leeds have got to be
looking over their shoulder as well.
Leeds have got.
Shoulder when it's Sunday.
We said, they got Wolves at home now, but Wolves,
they've picked up.
They're flying.
They played well against Liverpool.
Unbelievable. And they could play them tonight. You're doing the game tonight.
FA Cup, I'm out for the FA Cup, mate. Well, if like fans of most other clubs, you enjoy what's happening at Spurs right now, and you tune into the sports bar, then last night, by all accounts, was unmissable. I did hear a little bit of it, by the way. Jason was officially playing Keep Me Up with Jamie.
It's a simple question. Are you going down?
Yes.
We are the only team in the Premier League ever to bring in a new manager, to get a new manager bounce, and we get a world's bounce.
Okay, you're getting new manager trounce, not bounce.
Like, I'm trying to do a show here, I'm trying to have a say, and you're going to sit there and just try and mug me off for 2 hours. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it.
To dare is to poo.
I'd actually take Big Ange. It's got to that point. I would actually take Big Ange. I could do a better job. It is embarrassment. An embarrassment.
You're going down. No, seriously, last time. You're going down.
Shut up! Don't ask me again.
Realistically, Ali, realistically, it could be Tottenham Lincoln next year.
Yeah, as the Lionesses take a big step towards the 2027 World Cup, what have we learned before their crucial matchups against Spain? Leanne Sanderson chats to the Times women's football reporter Kit Shepherd about their qualifying campaign so far. Plus, you'll hear exclusively from Chelsea's Lauren James ahead of the League Cup final against Manchester United next weekend. All that and more on TalkSport's women's football show at the new time of 5 p.m. tomorrow on TalkSport 2. And of course, it's widely available as a podcast as well. Let me just tell you that in that game in Spain, we're into the last 10 minutes now. It remains Valencia 1, Alaves 2 would be an important result for Alaves. I think it would just about see them safe from any worries about relegation. Meanwhile, Andy, we're turning our attention, our microscopes and our telescopes on football in Italy, and the game in the San Siro has ended.
Yeah, only a 7-point gap at the top now because Milan have done it again against Juventus. 1-0, Pervis Estupiñán, the goal scorer against Inter.
Sorry, I'm not trying to pick you up, but it's important.
Yeah, it is quite important, I think you can say. Pervis Estupiñán, the goal scorer for Milan in the first half. He's someone who's found himself under a lot of pressure with Batisaghi coming through and really limiting his game time on occasion, and he was a big signing, of course, from Brighton, from the Premier League, and a goal for him to really make Milan the fly in the ointment again for Inter. Look, we know they're going to win the league, but they made it incredibly frustrating for them tonight, and maybe the lack of Lautaro, who was on the bench, and Marcus Thuram, who's had the flu, so he hasn't been able to train or play for a couple of days. Maybe that making the difference, but Milan always find a way in these derbies, and
but Andrew,
it's what they need, of course, to qualify for the Champions League.
Sure, but you say that Inter will be, frustrated by the fact that they're always getting beat by AC Milan. But Milan fans will be equally frustrated that they keep slipping up in games that you'd expect them to win, but they can always beat their local rivals and perennial title challengers.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the problem for them has been the San Siro this season. You know, they've let points slip, normally in draws against teams that they really should be beating this season. And that really goes back to them losing to Cremonese on the first day of the season. One of only 2 defeats they've had so far. They've lost by far the fewest amount of games of any teams in Serie A. Inter, for example, have lost 5 so far, despite being so clear at the top of the league. So I just wonder if they're going to have another redressing of the ranks of strikers again this summer, because no one has quite worked for them. You know, they've ended up playing Rafael Leao up front on occasion. Füllkrug has made a contribution at moments. They were happy to get rid of Nkunku if they got the right offer in January, despite the fact he only arrived last summer. Santi Jimenez has never properly stuck. You know, there are a lot of question marks, and if they had a top-class striker, I think they really would be in this title race because they defend very well.
Speaking of teams that defend very well, Roma, until very recently, were the best defence in European football. A 3-3 draw with Juventus recently put a dent in that. And when Daniele De Rossi was appointed manager of Genoa, you thought, well, there's one game that he'll probably do very well in, a game against the club that he represented with quite extraordinary distinction for over a decade. And sure enough, Genoa have beaten Roma.
Yeah, and you know what, Danny? I think when you look at famous players and you think they never turn out to be the type of coach that they were as a player, you know, they're a very different type of player than they were as a coach. I tell you what, De Rossi's teams fight like him. And I think that's really, really notable. Of course, he got really short shrift at Roma, and that's still quite a painful separation. Just as it was quite a painful separation from Francesco Totti when he was a director and he didn't really feel included and they got rid of him. Of course, Roma have had talks recently. Gasperini and Totti have been for dinner about maybe bringing Totti back into the fold. But the big thing for them is make the top four this season. Now they've fallen out of it because they lost at Genoa today. Now, look, Gasperini was raging with some of the refereeing and Roma didn't get a penalty at 1-1. But Genoa went into this and De Rossi, he never tries to hide from his emotion. He came out and said, look, this is hugely emotional for me, but the reality is it's my job to go and win this game. And they did really well too. Vitinha, who has been a pretty big signing for Genoa, who's not always worked out, got himself the winner in this. And they've made it difficult for some really, really good teams over the last little while. Now, you look at the situation, you look at the team that he inherited from Patrick Vieira, they're a total mess. And you look where they are now in the table, 13th place, 6 points clear of the drop with some really quite incompetent teams beneath them. I think De Rossi's done another fantastic job, and people want to stereotype him as, that guy who comes into the dressing room and G's up the lads sort of thing. And that may be true to a certain extent, but he's far more. Yeah, he's got more tactical wit than people give him credit for. And maybe out of the context of Roma, he can be judged fairly for what he is as a coach.
The beneficiaries of Roma's recent stumble have been Como, who, Andy, let's be honest, they have every week that goes by in Italian football, I expect them to fade away a little bit. We all know the story of this small-sized club with its tiny stadium, getting a bit of money, but every week that goes by tells me they're not going to fade away in this race, and they are heading for the Champions League if they keep up their form.
Yeah, third successive win this weekend away at Cagliari, which is not an easy trip as well. And they're way ahead of schedule because I think any sort of European qualification for them would have been good this season. But they've become more and more confident, especially in 2026. Some of those young players have really grown. And funnily enough, we've talked about it a couple of times, the fact that Alvaro Morata was meant to be the experienced head and, he has had some influence in the dressing room, but he's not scored a single Serie A goal, which you couldn't have predicted. And you'd have thought at the start of the season, if that was going to be the case, they'd find themselves in real trouble. But in fact, they've not needed him. Martin Baturina has started scoring really regularly, the young Croatian striker, and goodness knows Croatia could do with a few young players of significance as well. With
other than Busquets,
for sure, who will be a cornerstone for them for years to come, I'm sure. But
Andy, sorry to interrupt, but I've made such a fuss about this game. Of course, there's been a late equaliser in Valencia. Erai Comari has got an equaliser for the home side. So with they're literally into the first seconds of added on time now. It's Valencia 2, Alaves 2. A result that's okay for both teams, but doesn't quite cut the cord between them and the team struggling to avoid relegation.
But takes a little bit of pressure off Valencia. Look,
yes,
you're watching the game, not me. But if Erai Como score, I'm guessing it's a header.
You're absolutely right. It was, yes. Indeed.
Okay,
yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, but I mean, and the game's been nothing at all in the game. Absolutely nothing. Both sides have gone for it in that Spanish way. They haven't lumped into the penalty area, but both sides have looked to try and score at every opportunity. And 2-2 at the moment, and I don't know how long they've added on added on time. I'll let you know. It's 8 minutes, so that game is by no means over. 8 more minutes to go.
Right, I'm turning over.
Valencia 2, Alaves 2. It's worth turning over, absolutely. Andy, Fabio Paratici's Fiorentina, as I like to refer to them now, out of the bottom three for the first time since September. But again, a group of fans just not happy with even moderate success.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to be saying they'll be following a certain other English club in maybe getting relegated and winning a major European trophy. That would be a stretch. But look, they are in a particular position because they drew with Parma today at the Artemio Franchi to see themselves out of the bottom three for the first time since October. So I think, hooray, but they didn't win. And of course, the fact that Parma get a point means they're another club who probably aren't going to get sucked into that. Of course, Carlos Cuesta, as we talked about, the former assistant of Mikel Arteta at Arsenal, is doing a pretty good job there, given his youth. And Fiorentina are still under a lot of pressure because they're still a team full of like really big players who shouldn't really be in that situation in the first place. Of course, things have calmed down in recent weeks, and Vagnoli has done an increasingly good job, Paolo Vagnoli, the coach. But until they get those wins, and they've had a couple of dodgy results before that. They lost 3-0 at Udinese last Monday. They were well beaten. Before that, they almost managed to chuck away their Conference League campaign, having won 3-0 away at Polish league leaders Jagiellonia Białystok. They lost 3-0 in the home leg and only won in extra time. So really, they needed a big win today to sort of, I guess, get confidence back on board. And they didn't do that. So despite moving out of the bottom three, they were booed off the pitch.
OK, let's talk about people who've done well this week. My star man is Bowie. Ha, 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 ha. Kieran Bowie. You'll know that he left Hibs at Christmas to join a frankly useless Verona side. Well, today he scored his first goal. And the winner, as they came from behind to beat a normally reliable Bologna. So Kieran Bowie is my star man. Who is yours, Andy?
My star man is going to be from Napoli. Friday night, they're getting back on a roll under Antonio Conte. After all the emotion of last week of Romelu Lukaku's winner, it was down to someone else who really wants to be there. Elif Elmas, who came back to the club from Leipzig this summer. He scored the winner, his first goal since he came back to the club.
OK, listen, thank you very much indeed. That first hour has flown by. I hope you've enjoyed listening as much as we've enjoyed doing it. There's still 5 minutes to go in that game in Valencia. We'll keep you across that when we get back in a few seconds' time. Lots to get through in the second hour. Don't go anywhere. Stay with me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Brassell, on the Mighty Talk Sport and Trans Europe Express.
David, good morning, mate. First
good
of all,
morning, David.
Morning, all.
David, here's a quick one for you, mate. I know we'll not be talking European football. We'll calm everything down. I want to start with this statistic, right, which I would imagine would please you as much as anything. Everton, after reaching the 40-point mark in 28 games, that's only the second time they've done that in 9 seasons. Now, I reckon that in itself is an achievement. But, and I know you'll play it down, you must have a wee thought about European football.
Well, I said right at the start, Coisty, that I said to the players that, we need to try and aim for it and hope that it was possible. In truth, it looked a million miles away, to be honest, at the start. But I have to say, we got off to a pretty good start in the league, and it's given us something to hold on to. We've been up and down, and we're probably just on the outside of European football, if we're honest. But we're not that far away that we couldn't try and make a go of it.
David, obviously the Grealish injury was disappointing, but how happy are you now with the competition for places? Beto and Barry are in great form. You've got McNeil and Dibbling fighting for a spot. NDI and Tyreek George. You've got Branthwaite back as well. The squad's looking more healthy now, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, I have to say, Jack was brilliant for us in the early part of the season. He gave us lots of things which we haven't had, and he helped the team greatly. So we've missed him, and we missed him over the middle of the season, middle of sort of December and January, really, when we had also a few injuries as well. But probably no different to other clubs. But we're just beginning to find our feet a little bit again, and the players you mentioned, they're all beginning to step up.
These guys. More green jackets have been lost at the 12th than at the Augusta City Dry Cleaners. Rory McIlroy knows this better than most. But what is Amen Corner and why is it so iconic? The famous sequence has always been there since the Masters began in 1934. It didn't get its name until '58, though, when American sports writer Herbert Warren Wind, on the left, wrote, "At the farthest reach of the Augusta National Course, down in the Amen Corner." He drew inspiration from the 1933 jazz song Shouting in That Amen Corner by the Dorsey Brothers. The reason behind its difficulty is all in the sand and the water. Tournament officials don't even bother to count the balls lost in there each year, such is the sheer number. The 11th, named White Dogwood, is a downhill 520-yard par 4 with a pond to the left of the green and a bunker to the right. Both cause a lot of trouble each year. The 12th, Golden Bell, is perhaps the most famous hole in the world, with danger everywhere. Many aim for the flag, but look, get it even slightly wrong, and you're in the azaleas at the back, or the bunkers at the front, or even worse, Rays Creek. Or you can play it safe and aim for the open green on the left, you chicken. Tiger Woods once said, if you make 4 bogeys from Thursday to Sunday, you're doing well. And the highest ever score on that hole? 13. It's a par 3. Tom Weiskopf in 1980 was the sorry soul. Often the iconic Ben Hogan Bridge is the only thing players enjoy about Golden Bell. Even if you escape there unscathed, though, you met with Azalea, the dogleg par 5 13th. It tempts players to go for the green in 2, but cut over those trees on the left at your peril. Every year, it seems, Amen Corner destroys someone's dreams. Rory McIlroy dropped 3 shots through here as his round unravelled in 2011. In 2016, a year after navigating Amen Corner expertly, Jordan Spieth shot a quadruple bogey on the 12th to throw away his green jacket. I mean, it sounds like my game, to be honest. So who'll be the next to be brought to their knees, praying for mercy after Amen Corner?
Yeah, welcome back to Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. Andy Brassell's here as well, but I'm just going to go. They're still playing in Valencia. Andy, did you turn over?
In the words of Marca on their live text commentary, Madre mia, que final. Yes, I did.
Tell people, I told you had to. That's the way the game was going. Tell people what's happened in the last 3 minutes of the 101 that we're still playing.
So that equaliser that you were describing before to us for Valencia by Ere Comer was in the 90th minute. Since then, we've had 8 minutes of stoppage time. We are now in the 12th minute of stoppage time. There was, as you say, a yellow card, a red card for Ander Guevara, no relation to Che, of Alaves, and a penalty for Valencia, which was scored by Hugo Duro. Of course, Hugo Hard, a big favourite of this show. Very, very calmly taken. And the game is still going on.
Yeah,
3-2 to Valencia.
Match turned on its head, and congratulations to the captain of Alaves, Blanco, for doing his level best to double the number of red cards, but the referee just wouldn't satisfy him by sending him off for his protests. It was chaos, and they've had another chance, and Sadiq had a real good chance to make it 4-2. And they play on, and look, we haven't got time for this because now it's time for this.
Carrière le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe! Mbappe! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
Yeah, the referee in Valencia, he's obviously enjoying the game, has finally put the whistle to his lips and pointed towards the tunnel. Final score there, Valencia 3, Alaves 2. And whether it looked 10 minutes ago as though Alaves will be waving goodbye to their relegation fears, it's now Valencia who seem more likely to have to worry less about what's going on behind them. 3-2 is the final score there. Back to Mbappe watch. And we haven't got much Mbappe to watch, Andy, because he's still got this injury. And in truth, we don't know whether it's a niggle, a medium-term injury, or something slightly more serious, because knees are knees. I'm no doctor, I've got no formal qualifications, but knees are knees, aren't they?
Yeah, and especially with the World Cup coming up, there are a few hearts in mouths as well, and quite understandably so. Now, from a Real Madrid perspective, something that this week has done nothing to allay is the sense for most of this season that there's quite a serious case of Mbappe dependencia that Real Madrid themselves are suffering from, Mbappe over-dependence, because they've had 2 games that have not been brilliant, which we'll come to in a little second. But the issue with Mbappe, he was seeking to manage it. His team was seeking to manage it, but that hasn't been possible. You know, he's missed a couple of important games. Of course, they're all important games for Real Madrid at this point of the season, with them being in the race for La Liga just about, and for the Champions League, at least nominally anyway. There is no great confidence around Madrid that he will play in either of the games against Manchester City at the moment.
Which is huge.
It is huge. It's huge for the direction of their season. And if that's the case, and he's going to miss a stretch of time, maybe by the time he gets back, they won't be in the mix for La Liga either, because you've got to look at Barcelona and the players they've got coming back. Of course, they have a smaller squad than Real Madrid, which is clear. A better coach, of course, that's a different discussion. But we'll come on to the discussion of Real Madrid and their coach for now and for the end of the season and for next season in a little bit. But yeah, the rumour mill has been going pretty hard in terms of how serious this is for Kylian Mbappe. Now, we're not talking about surgery or anything yet, but we are talking about something that is going to require a little bit of time, and it will have a massive effect on the rest of Real Madrid's season. And of course, the decisions taken on his treatment may really affect France's World Cup hopes as well.
His absence, you could argue, was nullified because Real Madrid won. They won 2-1 at Celta Vigo on Friday night. But the manner of the win suggests that there is still some dependence on the great man.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking actually, watching the closing stages of that Valencia versus Alaves game, that there is nothing quite like watching a game of high stakes and low competence. And I sometimes felt that with Real Madrid on Friday night at Celta, actually. Celta made it really, really tough for them, as they often do for teams at Balaidos. And Real Madrid kind of nicked a win, really, with a massively deflected shot from Federico Valverde from the edge of the box in stoppage time, when it looked like they were going to let a couple more points slip. Points that they could not afford to let slip, particularly with the inevitability of Barcelona winning later in the weekend, as we expected to happen, and as did happen. But, they had a great opportunity to keep it tight at the top of La Liga, going back to Monday night when they had the mini derby against Getafe. And it did make me laugh a little bit when there was the discussion this week with Fabian Hürzeler complaining about Arsenal and their style of play, and Mikel Arteta biting back, and there being the stats about how long the ball was out of play in Brighton's game against Arsenal and how long it took Arsenal to get it back into play. I just wondered, had Mikel Arteta, well, firstly, are the people complaining ever seen Getafe?
Yeah,
and secondly, like, has Mikel Arteta been on the phone to Jose Bordalas, who's one of the cornerstones of La Liga, that no one wants him to be, but the way that Getafe make it difficult for teams, relentlessly waste time, get results on a low budget, it is one of the modern wonders of La Liga. And of course,
I think, Andy, and without being partisan about North London, the difference between Getafe and Arsenal is that Arsenal have the budget to play any way that they want and choose to play this way.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can say that. You can also say that Getafe scored one of the best winning goals that anyone will score at the Bernabeu this season, or in most seasons, actually. And we'll come to Martin Satriano a little bit later on the show, perhaps. But look, I think the notable thing was that Getafe did frustrate Real Madrid, but they didn't steal the game, which was really, really notable. And if Celta took a point off them on Friday night, which of course they almost did, they couldn't have complained either.
This is a weird question to ask, because they're still in the race for the title in Spain and they're still in the Champions League. But there's something about this Real Madrid team, and I've been a doubter since the start of the season, that makes me think I'm going to ask you the difficult question because I've got the big microphone. Could Real Madrid's season just fizzle out, Andy?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I said a couple of weeks ago that I thought it was possible that they could win La Liga without being the best team in it, because they are not the best team in it. You know, Barcelona are quite clearly the best team in La Liga. That's the same. Now they're 4 points in front as it was when they were 4 points behind. But look, I think Real Madrid are still in a rebuild that they'd rather not be in. I think there are quite a few issues with the team and the construction of the squad at the moment. And I think as brilliant as Kylian Mbappe has been on an individual level, he's done nothing really to improve that, because how could he? Should they have signed him, I think is a valid question as well. But the thing that concerns me the most at the moment, outside Arda Güler, where's the craft? So we spend a lot of time talking about Real Madrid's defensive issues, which is true. But the reason that Arda Güler was such a favourite of Xabi Alonso, and he's continued to be a favourite of Alvaro Arbeloa, who has kind of set himself up as the anti-Alonso, is because who else is really going to create stuff beyond like a moment of magic by Mbappe, and that's why they've become reliant on him, or Vinicius? They
can't rely on Trent to be producing goals from deep right back. Brilliant pass of the ball, though he is. So
but maybe Danny, maybe that's one of the reasons they got him in. You know,
definitely, I can see that totally, Andy. But because their football, you know, as I say, they're still in a chance of winning very big trophies. It's a bit clunky, Andy. It's a bit clunky. And what happens is that the clunkiness at the front eventually, either Kylian or Vinicius does something incredible with the football, and the clunkiness is forgotten because they've got the goal. But this is not what like watching PSG in full flight last season at all.
No, it's not.
No. Listen, well, thank you very much indeed for that. Of course, we're now just 90 plus. We're into single figures days away from that World Cup in the United States, Mexico and Canada. For those of you not watching but still listening to the radio without the visuals, I was pointing across to America, up to Canada and down to Mexico like I'm some kind of minor school teacher. But we have a new feature. This time it's about 11:30, a World Cup focus, and each week we'll focus on some aspect of the upcoming World Cup. This week, just so as you know, it is what would the World Cup be like without multi-times winner Italy, who haven't, of course, made the World Cup the last two times either. That'll be our feature at about 11:30. Next up here, though, we'll be looking at everything else that'll be going on in Spain. And, you know, there's never a week in Spain where something fantastic isn't happening. You'll hear about all of that in just a few seconds' time here on Trans Europe Express.
Let's go to Lauren, who's Arsenal fan. All right, Lauren?
Oh, hi, Jamie. Sorry, it's actually Laura, the Arsenal fan.
All right, Laura.
Hi, how are you, boys?
Yeah, we're good. How are you? You feeling good?
Up the Chelsea.
Oh, I'm feeling great. I've just come fresh off the back of presenting the Arsenal game on TNT and just, to be honest, really enjoyed it, Jay.
Oh, it's Woodsy.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Woodsy, you've done it.
What's happening?
Woodsy, why is it taking you so long to phone us up?
Do you know what? I've been revelling in a brilliant season and I've just been enjoying myself.
You know what? It's bad if Woodsy's phoning us up. It's bad. Hold on. Where have you been when you've been bottling it, Woodsy? What's happened? All of a sudden you go 7 points clear and you phone us.
Jamie, I had to scroll down my phone. It took about 5 minutes to find you on the table.
Oh, Woodsy, this is
scrolling.
Spurs ain't even played and it's the worst night for us ever. I'm like, what is going on?
I don't even want to answer questions. I just want to ask you how you're feeling.
Woodsy, take the floor.
Woodsy.
I'll sit back and enjoy it. All right, take the
Woodsy,
floor.
I feel sick. I feel sick as a dog right now. Honestly.
How awful is it? How bad on a scale of like 1 to Spurs is it right now?
I can't believe I'm getting stick off Woodsy.
Woodsy, can I
up Talk Sport?
Listen, to mark International Women's Day today, TalkSport's produced a special panel show bringing together some of its most respected on and off-air talent to offer an honest, inspiring and practical guide to being a female in sports media.
If you're watching at home and you're looking to get into the industry, this is the place to be.
When TalkSport started, that was made for me. It felt like my home. This was where I was meant to be.
There isn't an average day. Every day is different. And it was a radio course and then they failed me. And I was like, I'm in radio. I think as a woman, the imposter syndrome, you do sit and think, oh God, have I thought that because I'm a girl and I don't know enough?
If you're good and you work your backside off, you'll be fine. You know, you'll be absolutely fine.
This is a very big industry, but it's also a very small industry, and word travels fast.
You have to hustle. You still, whether you're on air or off air, it's a sort of industry where it's tough.
If there's a job that you want, work your tail off to make sure you're doing it, because if you're not, someone else will be.
Just get on and do it.
Yeah, join some of TalkSport's finest, Shabana Hearn, Angelina Kelly and Adrian Durham for tips, advice and discussion on the career of sports broadcasting or production. You can watch the programme under the theme of Give to Gain on TalkSport's YouTube channel and our women's football. Thank you very much indeed for all of that. Andy, let's move on then to Spain, where Lamine Yamal, once again answering his occasional critics with the winner for Barcelona at Bilbao.
He did it because Athletic have had a rough week, and we'll talk about the Copa del Rey in a minute. And they gave like as good a performance as you could hope to give against Barcelona. They had mostly the better chances in the game, despite obviously having far less possession. There was a matter of pride after they'd lost the Basque derby in the semi-final of the Copa del Rey. Just as Barcelona, of course, these were the two losing semi-finalists in the Copa games in the week. And Lamine Yamal, who has really answered his critics in the last couple of weeks, because so much is expected of him, because the highs are so high, a ridiculous amount on occasions. You have to remind yourself that he's only 18 still. And the goal was just absolutely magnificent, like unsavable by Unai Simon. And they really needed it at a moment where you wondered, are they just going to have to suffice with a point from this? If you look at the team they picked, that was the moment that if you're a Barcelona naysayer who thinks that they can't win La Liga and the Champions League both this season, this would be the moment to think that, because you look at the starting lineup, a little bit stretched, both Casado and Bernal, and Bernal's been brilliant, by the way, in recent weeks, Marc Bernal. In midfield, you think that, they're a little bit short. No De Jong, no Pedri, no Gavi at the moment. They're they're just taking it easy with Pedri after he's come back from injury. He did start the Copa semi-final, a second leg against Atletico in the week. But I think they showed quite pleasing grit. Start for Marcus Rashford as well, with Rafinha not being quite ready to play the whole game as well. And they've got to be careful, because this is a huge game, as we'll talk about in a little while, coming up for them in the Champions League this week up here in Newcastle too. So a good jobbed, it's fair to say, because Athletic is one of the most difficult away trips of any season. And even though it wasn't easy, I thought they played it very, very smartly. And for, in a world where people say Hansi Flick can't change, you can only play one way. And, they still played their high line and the rest of it. But I think they played quite economically as well, which I think is an underrated intelligence in the way you can play in today's game if you're one of those teams who's expected to play 60, 65 games in a season.
What about Bilbao, Andy? Did you say out of the Copa del Rey? We'll talk about the finalists very, very soon here. A season in which they've never quite got to grips with it, I think it's fair to say, for a variety of reasons. No,
it is true, Danny. And, they started the season with a squad that was sort of ravaged by injury, really. It's been a tough season for a lot of their star players. You look at the fact that Nico Williams was in the crowd. A lot of Barcelona fans online gloating about, oh, well, you didn't come to us, and there you sat on your backside on your 10-year contract, not winning anything, which is ludicrous. Obviously, if he wanted to win and win and win, he would have gone to Barcelona. But if you don't understand what playing for like your hometown team, especially if it's Athletic, if you don't understand what that means, I think you have to question your credentials as a football fan, really, and just get a bit of education, because he stayed there for a reason and for a good reason. It hasn't quite gone as everyone hoped for the moment. They can still get themselves into Europe, and you know what? If they were in the Conference League next season, I don't think that would be the worst thing for them. They've still got stacked squad.
They would start probably favourites, apart from whoever represents England.
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. Absolutely, they would. It's been a chastening season at some points, but they're still well positioned to, I think, salvage something from it.
Which takes us then to Madrid, where Atletico beat Real Sociedad by 3-2 in what it turns out, having seen the semi-finals during the week, was a rehearsal for the Copa del Rey final.
Yeah, it was, and it was a brilliant game. Really, really enjoyed it. And I think the fact that Real Sociedad have improved under Pellegrino Matarazzo is something that made it such a good game. Twice Atletico went in front and twice Real Sociedad hit back pretty much straight away. But 2 goals from Nico Gonzalez to add to the inevitable early one from Alex Sola, who always scores against his former club, got them over the line. And Nico Gonzalez, I think, can be a big player for them in the back part of this season. We'll wait and see. But it was a really, really exciting game. And to see how Atletico have changed, to see how Real Sociedad, after a really bad start to this season, have regrouped under this great new coach, as Matarazzo has been so far, and they can really make something out of the rest of their season. And especially after what's happened to Atletico in a La Liga sense in the last couple of weeks, because we've known they're heading for Champions League qualification, but we've known they're miles off the title race, which will be an enduring disappointment to them. And I think they needed to respond to their fans, really, after this week, because, of course, they led 4-0 from the first leg of the Copa del Rey semi, which was a lead beyond their wildest dreams. But the second leg, Simeone has received a lot of criticism in Spain this week because, of course, Barcelona came back, won 3-0, were not that far away from pushing it into extra time and maybe onto a win in what would have been an extraordinary comeback, really. And I guess a lot of people looked at Simeone and thought, if there was a week in which you were going to say Simeone is past his best as a coach or as an Atletico coach, this would have been it. Because he went into it as if he was playing with his 2014 or his 2016 team. The idea that, we'll just defend our box, it'll be fine. And this current set of players cannot do that. They're way too passive, and they allowed Barcelona to walk all over them, really, nearly to the detriment of getting into the Copa del Rey final. They will be favourites now they're there, and that would be a great last moment for Antoine Griezmann, who's not going to leave before the closure of the MLS transfer window to Orlando, and he's going to stay at the club till the summer at least, which is a huge boost for them from not always a starting perspective anymore, but certainly from a spiritual perspective. He's so popular in the dressing room, all the other players want him to stay, and for him to get one last trophy there would be pretty nice, I think.
Meanwhile, we talked at the start of the show about the great week Lens have had. In a different way, it's been a great week for Getafe, as they have put the skids under Real Madrid's title run and Betis' chances of finishing the top four.
Yeah, so obviously there's still a possibility that fifth could be a Champions League place in Spain. It'd be a bit of a travesty because after that defeat at Getafe, Betis are 11 points off fourth in fifth place. That really opens things up for teams like Celta Vigo or potentially even Espanyol if they were to recover their form, which has kind of been in free fall over the last little while. But a brilliant week for Getafe, as you say, 2 really huge scalps, 2 clean sheets, and goals in both of those games from Martin Satriano. And I don't think we spent enough time, Danny, talking about how brilliant his winning goal at the Bernabeu was. Bear in mind, this was a guy who his career's a really funny one. He's still only 24, came through at Inter, where everyone thought he's full of talent, came over to France, did pretty well at Brest, went to Lens, got an ACL pretty quickly, and then was shifted off to Lyon, originally as backup to Mikel Tadze. When Mikel Tadze left, he had to start all the games, and as soon as they got Endrick on loan, obviously from Real Madrid, they dropped Satriano like a hot brick. So for him to go over to La Liga and play like an absolute boss like he has so far, and that volley, oh my goodness, to score a winner like that on your first appearance at the Bernabeu, what a moment for any player. I like him. He's hardworking. He's very honest. He's more talented than people want to give him credit for. And he seems to have found the perfect spot at Getafe.
Well, Andy, thank you very much indeed, because you described my star of the week in extraordinary detail there, as if you'd already forgotten our meeting before the show started. So Martin Satriano, who you've heard there, what a great player he is my star of the week. Who's yours, Andy?
I just like him. What can I do? What can I do? My star of the week is going to be, going back to the games earlier in the week, Jorge de Frutos, someone who is another underdog, really. Someone who was at Real Madrid for a bit, but has never in his late 20s quite made it to one of the big clubs, despite the fact he made his Spain debut against Turkey last year. He is a winger of uncommon quality, very exciting to watch, did really well at Levante, has been at Rayo Vallecano for the last little while, scored 2 of the goals as they beat Oviedo earlier in the week in that rearranged game, 3-0. And they got themselves a draw as well at Sevilla this afternoon, which enables them to stay above Sevilla. Of course, Valencia have leapfrogged them with that 3-2 win over Alaves in that extraordinary game. But Jorge de Frutos is someone who doesn't get nearly enough love. He's fantastic.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, if you open your window, you'll hear a high-pitched squeaking noise. That, my friends, is the road meeting the rubber in the Champions League. Round of 16, Tuesday, Wednesday. Loads of coverage here on TalkSport and TalkSport 2. Andy and I will start looking at the 8 games that will decide the latter stages of the best club competition in the world next year on Trans Europe Express.
to see me fight with a lot of passion and ferocity. I think when you're boxing a taller guy who's okay with sneaking a little split decision win or whatever else, you have to go and get him. So I'm looking forward to putting it on the line.
He knows you, you know him. There's a fair bit of mutual respect, is there, Tony?
Definitely. He's a top fighter. He's someone who never ducked, so I respect that.
I mean, have you had history together before, as in sparring together? I know you were in the
We never spar. We never spar together. We went to the same Olympic Games, but we never spar. It was to the cruiserweight. It wasn't a cruiserweight.
Yeah. He picked up the bronze medal. You got the gold medal that year. Yeah. So it's an interesting time and an interesting clash. Did you ever think you was going to fight him?
I mean, when he went up to the heavyweight, of course, I was like, okay, maybe I can fight him, and especially because he's in the top 10, so that's a good opportunity.
How important is it getting home advantage as well? Because we was over at the Paris Olympics. You come up and done a piece for us for TalkSport, actually, which was great. You brought your gold medal.
Win a VIP trip to the British Grand Prix on TalkSport.
Yeah, listen up, Formula One fans. We're sending two of you to the British Grand Prix on Sunday, July the 5th, with the full Racing Green trackside experience. Forget the general admission, you're getting exclusive grandstand seats plus inner track access to watch the drivers roll into the paddock. And we've got the whole day sorted with all-day street food, a fully open bar and much more. It's the ultimate British Grand Prix completely on us. So here's how to enter. For your chance to win, text that word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or you can phone. Just call 0343 418 7260. The lines will close on the 20th of March this year at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. This is a network promotion. The full T's and C's at talksport.com. So for your chance to win the prize, text WIN to 83338. Do it now. So Andy, the Champions League is back. We know the teams are through to the last 16, and despite, you might say, the anomaly, and of course it's a historic anomaly, of 6 of the 16 teams being from one country, this being England, all the ties look in their different ways discussable and entertaining. Let's start on Tuesday. Let's go through the 4 ties on Tuesday, starting with, I guess, a game that last season you would have said Liverpool would be all over this, playing Galatasaray. So much has changed at both clubs, though, this season, Andy.
Yeah, a lot has changed. And sometimes you never thought you'd say this out loud, did you? It feels as if Galatasaray are in more control of big games than Liverpool are. And given that Galatasaray let a 3-goal lead slip in the last round of the Champions League,
that's saying something.
In the punishment round, that is saying something. But, you know, I think sometimes we can focus too much on the absolute last thing that happened. Whereas in reality, I think what's more indicative and what's more typical of Galatasaray's season is the fact that they're able to manage games really quite well, and that they're able to defend out narrow wins. And they did that this weekend, actually, in the Istanbul derby at Besiktas, that we'll talk about later. But if you go back to that game against Liverpool earlier in the season, I don't know about you. I think you agree with me, because I'm sure we've discussed this before. But the game they played against Liverpool in like the second game of the league phase, with a 1-1-0, where they played quite sensibly, where they gave up a lot of the ball, where they didn't really give much away, and when Ujan had to make saves, he did. That felt like a real step forward for Galatasaray, because we expect Turkish clubs to just go absolutely hell for leather in Europe and just, you know, play to
chaos to ensue, and then they tend to come out at the wrong end of a 4-2 match, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And this goes back to like the Fatih Terim days of, you know, let's not defend. If we're going to go down, let's go down with a fight. And actually, you look at someone, and we've mentioned him before, Okan Buruk, who is a coach who is well travelled, is quite cosmopolitan, and is someone who likes to attack, but I think realises that he can't do it in every single game and every single moment of every single game as well. So I think over 2 legs, of course, Liverpool are the clear favourites. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But Galatasaray can go into that first leg, and I think the first leg being in Istanbul works for them. Go and get yourselves a result, and then you've got something to play with going into that second leg when all the pressure will be on Liverpool, really.
Yeah, let's talk then about Newcastle against Barcelona. Barcelona we've already praised for being, measurably the best team in Spain. Unfortunately for Newcastle, Andy, they're another one who've got the car in sort of second gear, but 1 or 2 wheels are spinning the whole time. They are not more than the sum of their parts just now. And, well, I suppose it's a good opportunity to show what they can do, but they're not in the best of form.
No, that's true. But I did see Newcastle at first hand put up a really good performance against Manchester United last Wednesday. And I guess the interesting thing at the moment is their sort of gala team doesn't include either Nick Voltemada or Johan Wissa, which is something that would have been unthinkable at the start of the season. But I said before the last games against Karabakh, this would be the way forward for them in the Champions League. And not just because of the goals that Anthony Gordon scored this season, but because of taking advantage of high lines. Now, that's
absolutely. Barnes and Gordon are designed to break a high line defence.
And Elanga.
And Elanga, yeah.
Even though he's not been great this season so far and he's had difficulty adapting. And funnily enough, I was talking to someone on Wednesday night at the Newcastle game and saying, how much better would Elanga have done in a team that Alexander Isak was still in? And not just because of the association they have through Sweden, but in terms of the fact that, Newcastle were better at getting up the pitch quicker. And it seems to me that Eddie Howe has, in terms of what Newcastle are going to be in the medium term, he's like kicked the can down the road a little bit and thought, well, Gordon scoring these goals in the Champions League, which he didn't look like scoring earlier in the season when he didn't look anything like a proper centre forward, really. He's still not a proper centre forward, but I think he could be
horses for courses, Andy. Horses for courses.
Exactly, and I think he can be quite effective like that against Barcelona. We said in that game against Athletic this weekend, they will always play with that high line. I mean, we talked about Barcelona being sensible and managing their way to a 1-0 win. Joao Cancelo nearly scored an own goal after 19 seconds, but this is them playing it sensibly. So I do think a team like Newcastle will create opportunities. It's just whether they can take those opportunities, because you can bet your last euro that Ferran and Yamal and Rafinha, who I think was left out for Marcus Rashford for a reason this weekend, will make a massive difference in this game, because of course these teams have been able to size each other up from that time they played in the league phase, and I think they're probably in broadly similar positions actually.
Okay, the third game I want to talk about, and goodness knows that there's not. I mean, if you looked at that Spurs team against Crystal Palace the other night and said they were in the last 16 of the Champions League, people would look at it as though you'd literally lost a screw. They go to Atletico Madrid, Andy.
Yeah, they do, and a lot's been said about the players' lack of effort for Spurs. I just saw a team completely devoid of all confidence. I was at the game on Thursday night.
I'm glad I wasn't, but that's another story.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I'm not sure you can judge their Premier League form in a Champions League context, because pretty much everything they've done in the Champions League they've done right so far this season. And, I think Carlo Muani's had his best games in the Champions League so far this season, whether it be either of his former clubs. Of course, he hasn't played for Atletico before, which is maybe a bit of impediment to him.
You're saying that Conor Gallagher's going to get a brace, are you?
Yeah, maybe. Look, not to be ruled out, that it's going to be a huge night because Atletico are really strong at home. If Tottenham can come away with any sort of result there, and I include a narrow defeat there, they are well in this, because, as I said, Tottenham play, I think, very, very differently in the Champions League. Okay, you could argue that they had an easier run of fixtures, but they finished in the top 8, and you can't knock that. I think the other thing is Atletico, away from home, they do find a way to make themselves super passive and give up territorial advantage. And so if Tottenham have got anything to have a go at in that second leg, I think Tottenham have got a chance.
I don't want to be rude about my own team. That second leg could be a team that won't attack against a team that can't attack. That's what you're getting for your 90 quid. And what about Atalanta against Bayern, the final of the games we've got to discuss for Tuesday?
Yeah, really interesting one, because Atalanta, if they're going to do anything, they have to do it in this home leg in Bergamo, where they were brilliant against Chelsea. They're really, really good against Dortmund. I think since Palladino's come in, Scamacca has really clicked. Now, look, they came back from 2 goals down to get themselves a draw at home today, which wasn't really the result they were looking for. But given the situation that Palladino inherited, I think he's done pretty well so far. But yeah, they need something to hang on to going to Munich. As I said, I'm pretty sure that Harry Kane comes back for this game, but we'll wait and see. Manuel Neuer will not, as we know, that calf injury is going to stop him, and Jonas Urbig, who actually has really showed up in like the last couple of games that he's played. He was great in the Champions League game on match day 8 away at PSV. He was excellent in that. Of course, Bayern didn't really need to win it, but he made a massive contribution to that. And interesting to see this weekend as well, Jamal Musiala coming back. Now, that's been a side effect of Kane taking a bit of a breather as well, that maybe Musiala can be brought back up to speed. It's been difficult for him since he's come back to fitness, and coming into such a good team where everything's clicking. He's not really played with Luis Diaz before as well, which has been a bit of an adjustment. But yeah, look, for me, Bayern are one of the absolute favourites.
But as we round Tattenham Corner and into the home straight for the season, getting Jamal back could be just the turbo boost that Bayern Munich need. Fascinating fixtures there. They're no less fascinating. The games on Wednesday, including 2 monsters between PSG and Chelsea, and Real Madrid and Manchester City again. And we'll look at those games next here on Trans Europe Express.
Champions, honestly, the Europa League champions, Beyonce, chicky, can you me chicky? You're meant to win, hello, beat the big cockerel, honestly, the big cockerel, saves it by the stadium, there's that signing, where is he? Can you me as that signing? You're meant to win, hello, beat the Morgan Gibbs White signing, what happened to that one? Where's he gone? Can you me Morgan's White? You're meant to win, hello, beat to the Williams signing, Big Edge, do me a favour, can you me Big Edge? You're meant to win, hello, beat Edge, Big Edge, AJ Tracy, Seven Sisters train station, Adele, 3-point lane, there is to do, Jamie Horror, you're meant to win, hello, beating, ticking, Adele, Chick-King, Adele, Chick-King,
all right,
Chick-King, Adele, you're meant to win, hello, beating,
crestfallen,
Adele,
I'm crestfallen,
Chick-King, Adele, hello. Chick-King, Adele, hello, Chick-King, Adele, hello, Chick-King, Adele, hello, Chick.
All right,
Adele,
come on.
Adele.
say you people are really spoiled, aren't you? You really are spoiled. All day Tuesday, you'll be hearing the big races from Cheltenham live here on TalkSport. Fantastic coverage with the H&J team and Rupert and all sorts of goodies like that. And then in the evening, we've got the Champions League for you. The early kickoff is over at TalkSport 2, that game in Turkey between Galatasaray and Liverpool. That's followed almost straight away by a huge game in the Championship. Millwall looking to replace Tottenham in the Premier League, take on Derby. Then at 8 o'clock here on TalkSport, Atletico Madrid against the aforementioned Tottenham Hotspur. That's an 8 o'clock kickoff. On Wednesday, all day commentary from Cheltenham again with Rupert Bell and his cohorts. And then in the evening, live football at the TalkSport 2 at 5:45, the game between Leverkusen and Arsenal. That is matched in over here on TalkSport at 8 o'clock. The monster between Real Madrid and Manchester City, while over on TalkSport 2, you can hear Paris Saint-Germain against Chelsea. And I know what that is. It's nearly as monstrous. Full coverage of horse racing and Champions League football for you all over Tuesday and Wednesday here on TalkSport. Back to Wednesday, Andy. I can hardly pick which game is bigger. Let's start with the holders, PSG. Now, the way they played in the run-up to the final last year was some of the finest football I've seen for years. And yet, the other night, I watched Chelsea unpick and then eviscerate a decent, if out of form, Aston Villa. And I thought that was the best away performance I'd seen in the Premier League for 2 years. And they meet together.
So
they meet in Paris on Wednesday. Amazing.
Chelsea was so good. And PSG have not been at home in the last little while. And, I think you look at what happened to them against Monaco on Friday night, which was, I think, less excusable for the fact that Monaco had gone there, 9 days before in the Champions League and given them a bit of a fright and played really well. And PSG were let off the hook by that Koulibaly red card and the immediate Marquinhos equaliser that followed. It was such a strange game, that, because as I described to you at the time, and I was over in Paris for that game, it felt as if, despite dicing with danger for a lot of that tie, PSG felt in control for a lot of it as well. But really, if you were going to take anything from that positive from a PSG perspective, it would be that a lot of last season was like that, really, in the Champions League, in that their football was so dazzling that the bits where they really played with elimination, and you think of Villa away in the quarter-final, you think of how they started the second leg, particularly against Arsenal in the semi-final. The fact that they went 2-0 down to Manchester City, but despite the fact they were absolutely battering them in the league stage, that was just the point that PSG was starting to get momentum. But I guess the thing that I felt against Monaco that I hadn't felt watching PSG in a long time is a sense of panic, really, and sense of panic against an inferior team. And they never really felt in control on Friday night in the league either. Of course, they still lead Liga, but it's not a foregone conclusion all of a sudden. And I think,
and Liam Rosenior, for better or worse, knows PSG.
Yeah, he does. And he's.
I mean, there's a massive experience imbalance between the manager of PSG and the manager of Chelsea. But at least the manager of Chelsea has played several games against PSG and knows how they tick.
Yeah, and look, he's got a win against them. If you go back to the end of last season as well, at Meno. So it's been done. He studied them at really close quarters, as you say, which I think makes a difference. And the fact that Rosenior is a coach that wants to really work a team with the ball. This is something that PSG don't get a lot domestically, and they don't even really get in the Champions League. So, look, I think sometimes, we used to say in the old days when it was 6 group games and then you go straight to the last 16, there was a big difference between the games that come out of the hat and the games that actually end up being played in February.
I feel huge gap,
even though the timescale is compacted now, there's a big difference between the PSG versus Chelsea tie that came out of the hat and the one that will end up being played over the next week and a bit. I think Chelsea have got a good chance.
Maybe it's just because I've seen these teams win the Champions League. Maybe it's because of their power in the world game. But even a slightly flawed Real Madrid against a not quite perfect Manchester City is a very juicy prospect.
It's a very juicy prospect. But I think what gives City the biggest chance of really clinching this tie is the fact that Real Madrid still have the same defensive problems that they did last season. And I guess for all the flaws that Manchester City have got, and I do feel that outside Arsenal, pretty much every team in the Premier League is imperfect. It doesn't really feel like a great Premier League season to me, if I'm being completely honest.
It's a great season, but not with great teams.
Yeah, I think it's a great season from an entertainment perspective, but not from a quality perspective.
No, sure.
I think
I'd go with that.
Fair to say. But everything that City are doing right is in the front bit of the pitch. And that, I think, spells big trouble for Real Madrid. For me, I think City will win both of these legs. And, I think I will meet you back here in 2 weeks' time to talk about the successor to Alvaro Arbeloa.
Well, no such managerial jitterbugging for Arsenal, who look. You make your own luck to some extent, but they've had a really nice draw and a nice path to the final, should they do their stuff. And that starts with an away game against Bayer Leverkusen. Yeah, and
Leverkusen look a lot tougher on paper than they are in reality. They've not had a good 2026 so far. They're struggling to keep up with the top four, as you were saying earlier. They're 3 points adrift, and it could have been worse had Mainz not got a draw against Stuttgart yesterday. So they're in a bit of a spot, Leverkusen, at the moment. They've got some injuries. Of course, they've had a lot of turnover in terms of players this season. But I think because of that, one of the main problems has been the most experienced players. Kasper Hjulmand, the coach, has really flogged them. And even though he scored a brilliant goal from a trademark free kick yesterday, Alex Grimaldo has not looked himself in this calendar year. And it's because he's 30 and he's played week after week after week after week. He was rested in the right places by Xabi Alonso. And I don't think Hjulmand feels he has that option. Now, Robert Andrich, because he's playing as a centre-back rather than a midfielder, has maybe not had that physical load on his legs. But Alex Garcia, they had to take him out of the team a couple of weeks ago because he could barely stand up. He was so tired. The fact that they've got Kofane leading the line and not Patrick Schick at the moment is a bit of an issue. We don't know if Schick will be ready for this week. But even though Leverkusen, they showed up against Manchester City and they won that game in the group game when obviously Guardiola made a lot of changes. I think it's very hard to see Arsenal dropping the ball here. And funnily enough, I think the priority for Leverkusen is to make sure that they're back in this competition this time next season.
Yeah, not via winning it. Absolutely right, Andy.
Yeah.
Which takes us to the last tie, Bodo Glimt against Sporting of Lisbon. Not Sporting, Sporting of Lisbon. And Andy, who knew that you and I would live so long that people are making Bodo Glimt favourites for a tie against a Portuguese side?
I mean, it's remarkable. Look, I know they've beaten some good sides, and those 4 successive wins in the Champions League are amazing. That tells us they're in with a chance. It shouldn't tell us that they're favourites, because
Sporting are a good team, good team.
Player for player, they're better than them. There's no doubt about that. And you look at some of the quality they've got. Luis Suarez can't stop scoring at the moment. He's up to 23 Liga goals this season. If he was at a slightly different point in his career, we'd be having the Gyökeres type numbers. We'd be having a Gyökeres conversation about him. If it hadn't have been for Gyökeres having a difficult start to life in Arsenal and Suarez having battled his way to get to this point with Sporting, via a not great spell at Marseille, for example. But you think of him, you think of Trincao, you think of Pedro Gonçalves, you think of Jenny. They have got the players to really, really make it difficult for Bodo Glimt. And funnily enough, I trust them more than I trust a lot of the high-profile teams that have come a cropper there.
Yeah, and their job there in early March is to make sure they get back to the Iberian Peninsula, with the ties still very much in the balance. And
Funnily enough, I think one of the things that really benefits Sporting going to this game, everyone complains about the artificial pitch. Now, the Sporting players, they look as if they could play. There's such technical quality, particularly in the forward line and the midfield of that team. It feels to me like they always have a pair of AstroTurf boots in their bags, just in case, just in case a game breaks out at any point. And that, for me, means they're far less likely to make excuses and far more likely to play their normal football with the sort of skills that they've got in this game.
Well, look, every one of the ties that we've described then that you've analysed with such expertise has something beautiful about it. And let me remind you again, the ties you can hear here on TalkSport. Tuesday, the early kick-off between Galatasaray and Liverpool on TalkSport 2. Then over here on TalkSport, Atletico Madrid against the mighty Tottenham. On Wednesday, Leverkusen against Arsenal, the early kick-off over on TalkSport 2. Then that's followed again on TalkSport 2 with that game between Paris Saint-Germain and Chelsea. While over here on TalkSport, you can hear the 8 o'clock kickoff between Real Madrid and Manchester City. I've told you a million times, turns out it's true. TalkSport is your home of live football, your home of Champions League football.
Has the hiring of Edu destabilised the best season in a generation at Nottingham Forest? And how much responsibility does Evangelos Marinakis have to take for it? We understand that he's been told to stay away from the City ground, pending a termination of his contract at the end of the season. I know that Forest fans will be reluctant to criticise Marinakis, but is this a mess of his own making? Because he had a manager who was very successful, almost took them to the Champions League. He started to interfere, and all of a sudden they ended up dropping down eventually into the Europa League, but then they lost to Nuno Espirito Santo very quickly. So is this got to be on Marinakis' shoulders?
Of course it is. And do you blame Nuno Santo when you've got a sporting director coming in and probably not giving you a say on any players that you're bringing in? What do you expect as a manager? And if you speak to the older generation of managers, they'll say, what? Someone's telling me what players are coming in, and then I'm going to
That
get
is
judged.
the way of the world now, though.
I know,
isn't it?
but then is that fair as a manager? Like we said in previous shows, sporting directors should be coming on and doing press. You're the one bringing in the players. The manager's doing the best they can with these players. They might have wanted 10 other players that you have said no to. Some of the players that they brought in Nottingham Forest, Douglas Luiz on loan didn't work. Zinchenko on loan didn't work. Amari Hutchinson, 37.5 million. Only one Premier League goal in 22 appearances. McAtee, 30 million. Hasn't worked. Ndoye hasn't worked. Bakwa hasn't worked.
Who would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself? Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967 when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93 when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time. The acts perform for free nowadays, even though the experts reckon it costs around $13 million to put on Rihanna's show. Artists know they'll rocket up the charts in the following weeks. Rihanna's average sales improved by 140% in the months following her performance. The Super Bowl halftime show will be a fixture in pop culture for years to come. So the question is, who next?
Yeah, welcome back to the third and final hour of tonight's edition. Tonight's runaway edition of Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me, as always, is Andy Brassell. We've really got our skates on. We've got so much to get through in this final 55 minutes. We'll have Europa League and Conference League previews for you. And a lot of games, again, commentaries for you here on Talk Sport. We'll have the first of our World Cup focus. We'll be asking a simple question. What is a 46 team World Cup going to look like without Italy? And then Andy will take you around the leagues, including extraordinary story from the second division in Germany. That's all coming up here on Trans Europe Express. You're very welcome. But before any of those advertised sweetmeats, as always at 11 o'clock, it's time to go to South America to talk to Tim Vickery. Hi, Tim.
Hello, and this time South America has come to you because I've just pitched up in the country. So this time next week, hopefully there'll be someone in the studio, and I'll come in to say hello. But my immediate thought is, blimey, this island is uninhabitable. It's so cold. Just to think that on Friday I was going for a swim in the sea with turtles, and now I'm reduced to shaking more than Johnny Kidd and any of the pirates you care to bring up in conversation. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Well, very well, Tim. But I have to tell you that 350 miles to the west, out in the Atlantic Ocean, it's so unpredictable. It's nutty. On Wednesday, when I was doing doing H&J, I looked out the little window of my studio and it was snowing where I live. It snowed for 2 solid hours. The following day, you could have gone out in a lilac posing pouch. It was so warm. And I did, of course I did. So it's unpredictable, whereas I think the weather where you live is very predictable. talk about unpredictable. Tell us about the fate of poor old Filipe Luiz.
Well, I did tell you this time last week that he was under pressure, despite in late November coaching Flamengo. This is Filipe Luiz, the former Atletico Madrid, Chelsea and Brazil left-back. Late November, he coached Flamengo to victory in our Champions League, the Libertadores. Early December, he wrapped up the Brazilian title. Mid-December, took Paris Saint-Germain to penalties in the final of the Intercontinental. Got himself a new contract at the end of December. And just over 2 months later, one of them being by far the shortest month of the year, Flamengo sacked him, and they were in a real hurry to sack him.
That's crackers. That's just crackers.
What he didn't know is that when I spoke to you this time last week, he'd already been sacked, but they hadn't told him. And he took charge of a game on Monday. It was a regional semi-final against a very weak side, Madureira, but a weak side who had eliminated Vasco da Gama in the previous round of the local Rio State Championship. Flamengo had won the first leg 3-0. They won the second leg 8-0. Filipe Luiz goes and gives a press conference full of hopes for the future, plans for the future, goes back into the dressing room and in a 30-second conversation is tersely informed that it's P45 time. It is all over. The reason they had to sack him then is they got a final coming up. In fact, they're playing a final. It's gone to penalties at this moment. And had he stayed and won it, how'd you get rid of him then? How'd you do it? You got to. It's a little bit like Tottenham sacking Jose Mourinho before that League Cup final. You know, get him out before the final, before any chance of a lap of honour. So they'd lost early season. They'd lost 2 title games. They'd lost the domestic Charity Shield. And we never considered the Charity Shield a title in England, did we? Until Jose Mourinho pitched up and declared it a title and said that, especially after I've won it, I've won a title. So they lost that early February to Corinthians. And then the Thursday, so nearly 10 days ago now, they lost the South American Super Cup. They lost to Lanús of Argentina, the self-styled biggest neighbourhood club in the world, but still a neighbourhood club. And Flamengo see themselves as Real Madrid. So that was seen as the last straw. They decided to sack him after that game, but they had to get in a replacement. And the one that they've gone for, well known, I imagine, to Andy Brassel, is Portuguese Leonardo Jardim, who last year came over to Brazil, was in charge of Cruzeiro, did a really excellent job, moaned the whole year about the calendar, left at the end of the year saying, I will never coach another Brazilian side. And here he is in charge of Flamengo. It's a very interesting appointment because Jardim's style with Cruzeiro last year was very reactive. It was counter-attack. And that's not what Flamengo wants. And also Jardim is very, very independent. There were some rumours that Flamengo directors weren't happy with Lucas Paquetá being on the bench under Filipe Luiz after they'd made such efforts and paid such money to buy him. Jardim, when he took over Cruzeiro, there were some high-profile media signings, and he just turned around and said to the board, "I ain't going to pick him." So he's very much his own man, spreading joy across the 4 corners of the world. I don't think he is a confirmed miserabilist, if such a thing exists. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. And should they lose this penalty shootout, he will be under enormous pressure right from the start, because although the fans were moaning about the performance of the team this year under Filipe Luiz, where they had no time for pre-season training, the decision to sack him, I think, went down very, very badly indeed. And it was seen as a very, very shabby way to treat someone who had been with the club since 2019, 4 years, very successful years, glorious years as a player, and then very successful years as an under-17 coach, an under-20 coach, and plenty of titles as a senior coach. And this is someone who is destined for big, big jobs, almost certainly in Europe. His backup staff are Spanish. And I think getting sacked in this surprising way will almost certainly hasten Filipe Luiz going across the Atlantic.
Tim, I really like Jardim as a coach. He had a brilliant first spell at Monaco, in which they won the league and got to the semi-finals of the Champions League, of course. And Monte Carlo has sort of become his is based, because of course he went back there for a second less successful spell. In between leaving Cruzeiro and getting the Flamengo job, he came back to just hang out in Monte Carlo because, well, why wouldn't you? I suppose he still has a place.
50 days a year there for tax reasons. Now,
Yes.
this is also this could be a problem given the nature of Brazil's calendar.
Yeah, of course, you know, he might not last 50 days in Brazil. Who knows? We've got to wait and see, as you say. But what I wanted to go back to on Filipe Luiz, there was a report that's gone around in Brazil that the reason that Filipe Luiz was sacked is because he was speaking to Blueco, not necessarily about the Chelsea job at this stage. Of course, he's a former Chelsea player, but maybe in the medium term about the Strasbourg job. Is that just an excuse to sack him, or is that possible to stand that up?
Absolutely. When he got the job, and until he got his new contract at the end of December, he was the lowest paid coach in the Brazilian First Division because he came in as an inexperienced stopgap. So at the moment when he won these titles, he was the lowest paid coach. And the contract negotiations weren't easy because he said, look, I've done it now, give me more. And he was quite entitled to do that. And they dragged on a little bit. And I think he was having a look, seeing what's there. And it's clear that he sees his future in Europe. That's another thing that the contract negotiations rub the Flamengo directors up the wrong way. Because what they'd really like is someone whose biggest ambition in the world is to coach Flamengo. Now, Filipe Luiz, although he comes from the south of Brazil, he grew up a Flamengo fan, and he loved coaching them, but he didn't see himself there. What he wants, I think, is to be Atletico Madrid coach. So exactly. I think that was the first sign of strain in the relationship. So even before the ink was on the paper, the relationship wasn't as strong as it was before. But that is entirely the fault of the Flamengo directors. And Filipe Luiz was quite entitled to put feelers out to see what else was there before signing his contract, given how badly he was being paid before. And any coach knows that, especially in Brazil, they're pretty much all caretaker coaches one way or another. So, you've got to think about your future anyway. One day he's thinking, Flamengo might well sack me. But he never imagined it would be just minutes after winning a game 8-0.
World Cup less than 100 days away, Tim. Rodrigo out. A real shame for the player and for Brazil.
Yeah, it was certainly for the player. And he, even before there was all this noise about Vini, Brazil looked to him and said he's going to be he is the man. And Neymar published a thing on social media, and I remember Rodrigo came up at Santos, the same club as Neymar. Neymar saying, commiserating with him and saying, "Look, you are my heir." And for Brazil, it hasn't quite happened. He missed one of those. I think he missed the first penalty in the shootout against Croatia in that fatal quarter-final in Qatar. And I think he was looking at this tournament as the one to establish himself as someone really important. I'm actually quite surprised he didn't leave Real Madrid. And Andy's far closer to this and far more knowledgeable about this. But I wondered whether the time had come to leave and go somewhere where he could be the big fish. And it was certainly a huge objective of his to do that for Brazil in the World Cup. As far as Ancelotti goes, who's the coach, obviously, it removes a little dilemma for him, because the front four that Ancelotti wants to play, we will see in the conditions of extreme heat whether he will be able to do it. Three of them, I think, are fixed at this moment, and that's Estevão, Rafinha and Vini. The fourth, I think, was between Rodrigo and Mateus Cunha. And now it would seem to be Mateus Cunha, the striker who's played most under Ancelotti, although João Pedro is really putting in a very, very strong claim indeed. So a huge blow for Rodrigo, a blow for Brazil, but it is in a position where they've got a number of options.
I guess, Tim, the obvious conclusion to jump to from that is it's good news for Endrick, who, of course, is playing regularly again at Lyon. But a lot of discussion in France about him over the last week because, of course, he had a red-hot start when he initially arrived from Real Madrid. That slowed down a little bit. And there's questions about his physical capacity because, of course, he's gone from not playing at all in the first part of the season to playing every single week. And maybe that's not absolutely ideal.
Yes. Who will be the beneficiary of the extras, the place in the squad? I mean, I think João Pedro was in there already. I felt a little bit like Elvis Presley recording Christmas records in July over the past few weeks, because I've been trying to name the World Cup squads for a magazine, and the 26 for Brazil, I didn't get Endrick or Neymar in. With Rodrigo injured, this space opens up for one of them. It could even go to Igor Thiago. It could go. March the 16th is a key date now, because that's when Brazil named their squad for this month's friendlies against France and against Croatia. That's going to be very interesting to see who is the beneficiary of the injury to Rodrigo, because the history of football shows again and again and again that a door slamming in someone's face is a door opening for someone else.
Finally, Tim, tell us the wonderful tale of former Wigan striker Marcelo Moreno.
Yes, out of football for 2 years. Bolivia's all-time top goal scorer returns with a mission. He's playing for the club where it first started for him, Oriente Petrolero, in Bolivia. He's playing for free in a bid to get into the Bolivia squad. They've got to go through playoffs. They play later this month. They play Suriname. If they get through that, it's supposed to be Iraq. But quite what's going to happen with that one at the moment, nobody knows. But it's certainly going to be against Suriname first up. Bolivia have been desperate. They've been scored once in the last 6 games. They've been desperate for goals. And before he played his first game, he made it controversial. He said, according to the statistics, I am Bolivia's best ever player. Which, yeah, statistics and so on. But anyway, yes. He went out and he backed it up in his first game. He came off the bench, that they were 2-1 up. He set up 2 and he scored a penalty. So that's a triumphant start for him. It is a real rush job, after 2 years retired, just to come in and after a few weeks being a vital World Cup playoff. But Bolivia announced their squad tomorrow. First, they've got a warm-up game in 10 days' time or so against Trinidad and Tobago, and then they travel up to Mexico for this playoff. And I think he's probably going to be in. And what a fantastic story that is! That you can be retired for 2 years.
Go on, sorry.
You retired for 2 years, and then you could be the man who scores the goals, who sends your country to its first World Cup since 1994.
It is a great story, Tim, but then you've always got great stories from South America. Thank you very much, as always. Tim Vickery there with all the very latest. Next here on Trans Europe Express, we'll squeeze in some previews of the bigger ties happening in the Europa League and the Conference League this Thursday.
So it makes it more interesting, I think, Simon, for fans of other clubs. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
If it was all to finish today and this was in operation now,
you'd go way down to 17th of Norwich in the league and a chance to get into the 8th spot. That's what you do.
Right.
You take 60. You take
it opens up. Yeah.
You take 66% of the league as it sits now. 18 clubs in this league could have a reasonable shout to make a claim for getting 8th spot, because there's 11 games to go in the conventional season. There's 6 points between Derby in 8th and Norwich in 17th.
Right.
And those games, and when you get running at the business end of the season, it really does change the dynamics of how people play. All of a sudden, you've got 66% of the league
having something involved. Then you've got the other 25%, or 35%, sorry, sort of going to the Gabriel Bongle arithmetic school, the other 34%, which would be fighting for not staying in the division. So you've got constant jeopardy in a league, which actually reminded me when I was over in
Win a VIP trip to the British Grand Prix on Talk Sport.
Yeah, listen up, Formula One fans. We're sending two of you to the British Grand Prix on Sunday, July the 5th, with the full Racing Green trackside experience. Now, forget general admission. You'll be getting exclusive grandstand seats, plus inner track access to watch the drivers roll into the paddock. And we've got the whole day sorted with an all-day street food for you and a fully open bar and more. It's the ultimate Grand Prix, completely on us. The British Grand Prix is, of course. Here's how to enter. For your chance to win, just text that word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Text costs you £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or you can phone. You can call us on 0343 418 7260. The lines close on the 20th of March at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's are at talksport.com. So this is your chance to win. Just text that word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Do it now. The best of luck. So, Andy, you remember I started the show by talking about the fellow who shouted at me in the petrol station at Paulstown how much he loved Trans Europe Express? Well, it turns out he's called Paddy Lynch. And Paddy has tweeted me to say, "Hi, Danny. Sorry if I started you yesterday at the filling station in Paulstown. I would have stopped to say hello, only I was running late for a wedding and would have been in more trouble if I was any later. Loved the show," says Paddy. Paddy, we love. I didn't mind you. I couldn't hear what you were saying because I had the old fuel pump on, as it loads the gear into your car. But listen, thank you for waving and shouting at me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks very much indeed. Europa League, Andy, on Thursday. Villa, who I suppose being the English bigwigs in the tournament are the favourites, they play Lille in the double L derby.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because Lille have been out of nick, but the result that they got in the last round of the league phase against Freiburg has sort of propelled them a little bit, really, onto at least an acceptable level of form. They're sort of back in the mix for Europe in Ligue 1 now. And, they only got a draw today. They conceded a late goal against Lorient, which is annoying for them. So it's hard to know completely what we're going to get out of them. It's been quite up and down over the last couple of months. Now, Olivier Giroud was meant to start today and he pulled out at the last minute after not feeling great during the warm-up. So we'll see if he recovers for that, because I'm sure they'd love to give him a little go against Villa. But it was Matheus Fernandes-Pardo who scored the goal today. He's really great. I could see him really working well in the Premier League, a forward who really likes to dribble, and you don't really get that many of those these days. So he's someone who has got a winger's qualities that can be employed in more central areas as well. I think this would be an interesting tie. And remember, of course, Lille made it super difficult for Villa going back to Europe last season as well. So the season before last, sorry, as well. So, I think I wouldn't say it's totally evenly matched, but with the fact that Villa's form has been a bit iffy at the moment as well, I think there's a degree of jeopardy in this. And look, Lille will get a great home crowd for this as well. It'll be an exciting match, I think.
Forest take on Midtjylland, and that should be a reasonably comfortable two-leg win, perhaps for Forest. But they, of course, are also crotch deep in the relegation race.
Yeah, and of course, Midtjylland have already beaten them in Europe this season. Now, look, I know you can say that was in the Ange Postecoglou era, etc., etc. I think you look at where Midtjylland are at the moment, and a little like some of Scandinavia's biggest clubs, and I think you look at FC Copenhagen as a good example of this as well. They are in a position of greater strength than people can see from the outside. Now, you look at the fact that they were able to bring back Philip Billing to Denmark, before he turned 30. I think that's an incredible thing, really. Bear in mind, he played for the Serie A champions in the second half of last season. He's an Italian champion, and he ends up playing in the Danish Super League this season. Now, I'm sure a lot of that's a personal choice, but there's money there if they're available to do that. So Midtjylland, I thought, gave a really good account of themselves at Nottingham Forest in that game. A different Forest team, but equally, as you say, in a bit of a hole. And it's difficult for I think, for both them and Tottenham to kind of know whether to stick or twist, really, because, you want to say to yourself, well, success breeds success, and if we do well in this, that will hopefully help us. But I think you could see in that last Forest game against Fenerbahce, where they had that almost impregnable lead from the first leg in Istanbul, they didn't really know whether to stick or twist. And Vitor Pereira talked about it quite eloquently afterwards. I was at the game, and he said, look, the fact is, I picked a team bearing in mind that we've got a massive Premier League game coming up, and basically we didn't really know we knew it would be rough, I think were the words he used, but we just didn't know quite how rough. And when it got rougher, then we had to make some changes. And I think that is something that really compromises Forest's future in front of quite organised, on it opposition.
Andy, we've got so much to get through and so little time. The interesting game without, in this side of the draw, without an English team, is Stuttgart and Porto.
Yeah, it is. And Stuttgart have been brilliant all season. Porto, who got a decent result today, but they were 2-0 up at Benfica and didn't quite see it over the line. Look, they've had a really good season as well. Francesco Farioli's a really interesting coach. And I think the interesting thing about this is, you say, this side of the draw is super stacked. I mean, you look at the fact, Lyon, you're delighted if you're them. Obviously, they've fallen off a bit form-wise recently, but they've got the much better half of the draw. And on the other side, you've got Villa, Forest, Stuttgart and Porto all in it. I mean, what we're looking at, if everything goes to plan, is a Villa-Roma quarter-final as well, which will be a really tough one. I mean, there's going to be one side of the draw with some really, really fire games in it.
Moving then on to the Conference League, and I'll tell you about our commentaries on Thursday here on TalkSport in a second. Obviously, Crystal Palace now, free of relegation worries. They can concentrate on this. They play Larnaca. But the game you want to talk about is the one between Samsunspor and Rayo Vallecano. Yeah, and I think these are two teams who have a really good opportunity to get deep into this competition. Samsunspor, who are, they finished third in the Super League last season, which is not to be sniffed at all. It's a really good result. They've since parted company with Thomas Reis, their coach, and replaced him with another German in Torsten Fink. But they are making a rare European adventure. And you look at Rayo Vallecano as well, who you talked about teams being able to put relegation worries out of their mind. They were well in it 3 or 4 weeks ago, and a string of really good results have given them the freedom to have a really good go at this game. They're fun to watch. They're good on the counter-attack. I think these will be two really good games, and I think either of these teams can see themselves in maybe even the last 4 of the competition. Yeah, it's going to be great fun. Let me just tell you about our commentaries here on TalkSport and TalkSport 2 on Thursday. At 5 to 6, there's that game in France between Lille and Aston Villa. That's over on TalkSport 2. Then you can just roll straight through on TalkSport 2 to the game between Palace and Larnaca. While here on TalkSport itself, the 8 o'clock kickoff between Nottingham Forest and Midtjylland will be our feature attraction. 3 big games for you from the Conference and the Europa League on Thursday, right here on TalkSport.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The football club. It's unbelievable. The people in charge of this football club. One of the biggest clubs in the world. And an absolute mockery. We're a mockery of a football club that we've allowed this to happen.
Are you going down?
And the fans have had to accept it.
You're going down.
Jace, shut up. Don't ask me again. Seriously. Like, I'm trying to do a show here. I'm trying to have a say. And you're going to sit there and just try and mug me off for 2 hours. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it.
That's a question. No problem with me. It's not my fault you got beat tonight, is it? I wasn't playing centre off.
It's so bad.
There's no point up, Jake. Don't have a pop at me, mate. Right?
I'll have a pop at you if you're trying to mug me off.
No, I'm not mugging you off. I'm asking. It's a simple question. Are you going down? Are you?
I can't do 2 hours with you, Jace, if you're just going to be an idiot. I mean, how can I take you seriously? You've got an Ange mask on and a clown mask.
What about 3 hours?
I can't do 2 hours of calls with you. I can't do it. I can't do it. Just please.
It's not my fault. You're rubbish.
Please, like, what? For me,
okay.
like, don't ask me that question again. All right? Just because.
What question?
All right, look. I want to hear from Spurs fans. It's obviously a shocking. I'm genuinely crestfallen. Genuinely crestfallen. It's the worst I've ever felt.
Do you think you're going down? No, it's a different question this time.
Well, how's it a different question?
I said, are you going down? Or do you think you're going down? Do you think you're going down?
Yeah, welcome to the first. As you know, we're now counting down less than 100 days to the World Cup, and during that 100 days, Andy and I will be bringing you a World Cup focus. We'll bring up an issue or a team, something that we want to... Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. And we'll bring you something important about the World Cup that maybe hasn't been talked about too much elsewhere on on the TalkSport network. Now, Andy, when the tournament got expanded to 46 teams, I had a thought, and I don't want to be, one of those people who just goes wading into things without thinking about them. I don't want to be that narcissistic disaster that is Gianni Infantino. But it did strike me that with that many teams, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they just said all previous winners qualify for the World Cup. That way you'd have Spain, Germany, England, France, Italy, Brazil, Argentina and Uruguay. And who wouldn't want to see those teams in the World Cup? I know it's anti-competitive, it's just a thought I had. Now, 7 of those 8 have qualified anyway. The exception, as seems to be becoming habitual, is Italy. Regular winners of the World Cup. Recent winners of the European Championship, every England fan will remember. But once again, Andy, clinging on to qualification by their fingertips with a nation looking on in actual trepidation.
Yeah, and I think that is worth underlining, the feeling in Italy. And I've spoken to a few Italian journalists and fans about this. And the thing that's really struck me is they've come back with almost the same feeling. It feels like a widely shared feeling of real sort of doom and trepidation, actually. Because what I'd be thinking is, okay, Italy didn't get it done, and those 2 games against Norway really cost them. In the end, the fact that they lost that game so heavily at San Siro, the last qualification game, didn't really matter because they weren't going to finish top anyway unless they won by a huge margin. But it's just the fact that there's a real sense that we're going to drop the ball again. And I guess you look at some of the ways in which they've fallen short. And I think the one that really springs to mind is the qualification playoff in Palermo against North Macedonia, where they had enough chances to win about like 3 games, really, and then conceded the goal to North Macedonia, who we know are a decent side, right near the end. And these things are not easy to erase from your mind or your heart, I suppose. Now, look, no one's saying that Gennaro Gattuso is the greatest coach that's ever coached the Italian national team. No one's saying that this set of players is the greatest set of players to ever play for the Italian national team. Even if they've got issues, which Roberto Mancini seemed to almost delight in, like underlining.
Highlighting,
Yeah, mainly, I think, to extricate himself from certain views. It's a team that should still be at the World Cup. But
think about it, Andy. You've got Donnarumma in goal. You've got a whole clutch of Inter Milan centre-backs. You've got Di Marco, who may be the best player in his position in the world. You've got Tonali in midfield. I mean, they've got tons of talent. A little bit short up front, I guess it's fair to say. And that's the problem with qualification. And particularly with these 2 league games, you've got to score.
Yeah, the weight of history, I think, is the biggest thing, though. Like, you know, if you're telling me that Moise Kean can't score the goals to get them in the World Cup, I just don't agree. I mean, honestly, I know he's not had the greatest season of his life, but if you look at his Italian national team form, it's not to be sniffed at. And I think one of the good things that Gattuso has done since coming in is made them a bit front foot. So, okay, some of it's a little bit harem-scarum when you think of that mad 5-4 win away in Israel. But they had to extricate themselves from some difficult situations in that, and they managed to do it by being front foot, by being positive. And I actually think that of all the coaches that they could get to deal with this moment, firstly, Gattuso's not nearly as tactically naive as people who don't really know about him want to paint him. Secondly, he is someone who realises the opportunity of leaning into difficulty to overcome it. Every job that he's taken almost exclusively in his managerial career has been a difficult one. And he doesn't shy away from these moments, which I think is very important for the players to have that feeling from the coach. The other interesting thing, if we're talking about veteran leadership, and Gigi Buffon talked about this week actually, but they're not closing down the idea of bringing back Marco Verratti for this game, for these games, hopefully, because from their perspective, because of course they're playing Northern Ireland in Bergamo first off, and then if they win that, they'll have on the 31st of March the playoff final, which will be either away against Wales in Cardiff or Srebrenica against Bosnia. So we'll have to wait and see. On paper, they should win those 2 games and it should be no problem. But really, I think that's why they probably need someone like Verratti in the dressing room, someone who's not been as associated with recent failures, someone who's been there and done it, someone who's really going to seize the moment and be able to take a deep breath and put his foot on the ball and get them through those difficult moments, because you know, it's not going to be easy, mostly, I think, from a psychological perspective rather than just from a football perspective.
Andy, you know, we want the World Cup to be representative of the global game. Therefore, it's brilliant that there are more teams from Asia, Africa in it. It's a bit nuts that it's almost impossible not to qualify from South America, but that's a separate issue. Does it matter if one of these traditional superpowers, multiple winners of the World Cup, doesn't actually make the finals?
Well, it matters to them.
Sure, but what about to us, the sort of neutral football fans? Should it matter?
Yeah, I think it should a bit. And, I think there are people over the world who, when England missed out in 1994, felt something. And when they missed out Euro 2008 as well, felt something. Because, essentially, the World Cup is about history, and Italy and Germany, just like Brazil and Argentina, are an absolutely huge part of that. Of course, it's not unreasonable in any way, shape or form, but they have to earn the right to get there. And look, you think of the last time and those Jorginho missed penalties, they had a host of match points that they frittered away and they still didn't make it. And you can't blame anyone else but the team for that. But what I think is really important for this generation of players, and actually for the next generation of players, is to be able to say, we're separate from that. That's in the past. Can we just get over it? I mean, obviously, getting there and actually doing something are two different things. You look at the fact that it was remarkable that our producer Jack was pointing out to me that they haven't won a knockout game at the World Cup since the 2006 final. So basically, if you're 20 years old or younger, you haven't seen Italy win a knockout game at the World Cup.
And yet they've won the European Championship in a more stacked tournament. It's
exactly. It's unbelievable. And when you think about that, I talked about the experience of Verratti and how important that would be. Well, maybe actually that we should be looking to some of these younger players, so you look at like Pierre Saj, for example, who's come through and been brilliant actually when he's had his opportunities since the Club World Cup last summer. Maybe someone who doesn't have the weight of that history is the person who could come forth and seize the moment.
And given what you just said about Jack's statistic, Pierre Saj has never seen Italy win a knockout game in his whole life in the World Cup. No. That's just incredible, isn't it? Can you give any comfort? You don't know this, Andy, because you're up there in your castle in Newcastle, Newcastle as you would have it. But tonight's engineer, Marco, as his full name suggests, is doing the show in an Italian training top. Can you give him any hope that he'll be watching his team in the World Cup in America in a few months' time?
I can give Marco hope that it'll continue to look stylish, whatever the result will be, because that's what Italian football does better than anyone else. I think is fair to say.
Yeah,
I think they'll get there. I think they'll get there. I don't think it'll be easy, but I don't want to go as far as to say I think the appointment of Gattuso is a masterstroke, because I just think it's necessity. But I think he's better equipped to deal with the situation that, let's be honest, most coaches just don't want to deal with. I think he's someone who is really well cut out for this situation, and that will maybe make the difference.
There you go, Marco. You asked me to get you some comfort. I'd say it was about 55% comfort there, while also sitting on 45% tin tax. Listen, thank you very, very much indeed, Andy. Andy will take you around the leagues as we head towards the finishing line here on tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express.
I've got lots of Tottenham mates, and
mate,
they're devastated. They can't watch. They said I couldn't watch it last night. I'm not going to watch it. I can't watch it.
Seriously?
Yeah, they're getting to a stage where they're so nervous about going down, which I thought about 3 weeks ago. Oh, they'd be fine.
So did I, mate.
Now, with what I've seen from Forest, what I've seen from West Ham, they're banging it.
Right, I'm the same as you, mate, and I bet you
Leeds will be looking. Leeds have got to be
looking over their shoulder as well.
Leeds have got.
Solomon at Sunderland.
We said, they got Wolves at home now, but Wolves,
they've picked up.
They're flying.
They played well against Liverpool.
Unbelievable. And they could play them tonight. You're doing the game tonight.
FA Cup, I'm out for FA Cup, mate. Well, if like fans of most other clubs, you enjoy what's happening at Spurs right now, and you tune into the sports bar, then last night, by all accounts, was unmissable. I did hear a little bit of it, by the way. Jason was officially playing Keep Me Up with Jamie.
It's a simple question. Are you going down?
Yes.
We are the only team in the Premier League ever to bring in a new manager, to get a new manager bounce, and we get a worse bounce.
Okay, you get a new manager trounce, not bounce.
Like, I'm trying to do a show here, I'm trying to have a say, and you're going to sit there and just try and mug me off for 2 hours. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it.
So dare is to poo.
I'd actually take Big Ange. It's got to that point. I would actually take Big Ange. I could do a better job. It's embarrassment. An embarrassment.
Going down. Let's see.
Oh boy, they've just sent me from the control room in London a picture of Marco, tonight's engineer, in his Italian training top. It is, of course, an absolute spectacle. They always have the best kits. And Marco is stood up with his training top on and topping the whole thing off with a kind of Prince of Wales pattern baseball hat. That is some look to be taken to work with you here on Trans Europe Express, where, Andy, it's time to go round the leagues, starting with Portugal, and of course that means we have to talk about Jose Mourinho again.
Yeah, I mean, look, he didn't want us to, but he got himself sent off in the closing stages of Benfica 2, Porto 2, and it was a huge weekend in the Portuguese League because we had the big four, as I guess they are nowadays, playing each other. Now, Sporting conceded a 94th minute equaliser at Braga last night, second place Sporting, which left them a little bit compromised. Rodrigo Salazar, actually, who you may remember, missed a penalty against rivals Guimarães, bitter rivals Vitória Guimarães, in the Taça da Liga, the Portuguese League Cup final, going back a while. And since then, he's scored a big penalty against Guimarães in the league to win the derby. And now he's scored this 94th minute pressure penalty against Sporting. So kudos to him in terms of getting over a difficult moment and showing that you absolutely can get past it. But this gave Porto a great opportunity, and they went 2-0 up in this game. Victor Froholt again scoring, again playing absolutely fantastically. Oscar, the 17-year-old Polish wonder kid, scored a brilliant goal on the counter-attack to make it 2-0 at half-time as well. Now, an 87th minute equaliser by Leandro Barreiro for Benfica keeps them just about in the title race. They're 7 points off the top. And I guess more importantly, it keeps the title race alive because it means that Sporting are still only 4 points rather than 6 behind Porto, which would have made a massive difference. 6 points gaps at the top of the Portuguese League at this point in the season do not get made up. Now, Francesco Farioli talked about it afterwards and said that we've only ourselves to blame for not killing the game when it was 2-0. And I think that's right. They had opportunities on the break, but they've conceded a late equaliser to Benfica and to Sporting in the last month. And maybe that has a massive influence on the title race as it goes forward, even though they're still on top. But Mourinho was sent off in the aftermath of the equaliser for kicking a ball at the Porto bench. And he said, look, I didn't do that. He said, I know I'm technically not very good, but that was meant to go in the stand, basically. And he also went off on one about how Lucho Gonzalez, former Porto player, is now assistant to Fadioli, called him a traitor up to 50 times, in his words. So, you know, all fair in love and war and football benches, right?
But I mean, that's incredible. He's counted the number of times that he's been dissed, to use a phrase that nobody's used for 20 years. Let's go to Turkey then, Andy. Two of the big teams played each other, and you can tell us about Besiktas against Galatasaray. And then you can tell us about Fenerbahce, who are playing Samsunspor. And, you know, Turkish football, we both said it before in the meeting, so let's have it. Let's get it out there, broadcast it. When the big 3 or 4 are playing and they're behind late in a game, do not be turning off your television and making the tea.
It's like the golden years of Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, really.
Yeah.
And if you're Domenico Tedesco and you're listening to that tonight, you're like, yeah, I can live with that. That's pretty good.
Yes.
So the big result of the weekend was Besiktas 0, Galatasaray 1. Victor Osimhen scored the winning goal with a header. He always turns up for the big games. He's so important to them. Could have been sent off for a second booking in the second half, sort of Van Persied it and then some. After the whistle had gone, put the ball in the net when he definitely knew the whistle had gone and the referee declined to give him a second booking. I think probably regretting giving him the first one. Sure. So that was a moment. Leroy Sané got sent off on the hour then for like a very debatable. Maybe it wasn't even a foul sort of challenge. That meant Galatasaray played the last half hour with 10 men. We talked about how good they are at negotiating difficult moments and closing out narrow wins, and they did that really well. But it looked like Fenerbahce were going to be well adrift. You know, going into the 90th minute, they were 2-1 down at home to Samsunspor, and then 2 of their young players really showed up. Nene getting the equaliser, and then with pretty much the last kick of the team, Siddiqui Sharif scoring from a corner. Now, bear in mind, this is a teenage striker who had a lot of Premier League interest. Palace were interested in him amongst a host of other clubs. Chose to go to Fenerbahce. It was really good in the second game, particularly against Forest, I thought. And so even though they didn't get the superstar forward they wanted to replace John Duran this winter, he was someone who's worked really well for them. Goal for him right at the end, and it keeps the gap at the top at 4 points. So it keeps the league alive. It's a really good result for the league.
The Netherlands, of course, the whole, you know, obviously PSV's, I mean, it's a Shergar, look it up, people, a Shergar-style win in the title race for PSV. But the story of the season, Andy, has been the utter continuing chaos at Ajax.
It has. So, obviously, with them going down 3-1 at Groningen this weekend, way up north, there were 2 effects of that. And combined with Feyenoord only drawing 3-3 on the road today, that meant that PSV, with their late winner, set up, of course, by Ivan Perisic to help them get over their cup exit in the week for Ricardo Pepi. That got them over the line against Twente. There was a Troy Parrott own goal in that as well for PSV earlier on. So good to see him warming up for the Republic of Ireland's big challenge ahead. But that means PSV are now 19 points clear. But the loss at Groningen was a slip up on the road too far. At this point, it doesn't look like Ajax are going to get second place. They're currently 5th. They're 5 points behind Feyenoord, who have not been in great forms themselves, with 49 points. And so Fred Grimm has taken his leave, and he has been replaced, as I believe we predicted on here, by Oscar Garcia. Of course, is the sporting director, Jordi Cruyff, is a big fan of his. We said how he'd come in at young Ajax to develop young players, as he's so good at doing. You might have pointed out to me that, well, you wouldn't get Oscar Garcia in the front door as a new coach, so maybe you get him in the back door and see what happens.
Yeah. Well,
and that's exactly what's happened.
Fred Grimm is going to go back to coaching one of the younger teams, but I shall miss his name regularly here on Trans Europe Express. Yes. Fred Grimm. A real hipster. They had the semi-finals of the Dutch Cup. Lovely trophy, by the way. Look it up. A real hipster final.
Yeah, Nijmegen beat PSV 3-2 this week in what was a real shock. AZ won the other semi-final against Telstar. So that means that we've got two of the overachieving teams, I suppose, of this season, particularly in terms of Neck, who are in third place. They won their game today, 3-0 against Volendam. So they are having an incredible season, really. And given that Go Ahead Eagles won the Cup, going back to last year, it's beautiful, I think, in a modern football context where we just see the big teams rest their teams in the earlier rounds and then absolutely batter all the opposition from the quarter semi-finals onwards. It's lovely to see some different names engraved on that silverware.
By the way, well done, Port Vale, in the middle of all that, Andy.
Yeah.
Right, you've got about 30 seconds, perhaps a little more, to tell us about how in the second tier in Germany, the fan disgruntlement VAR has reached new heights.
Yeah, look, Danny, if you're a Preußen Münster ultra, now is probably the time to tell me. And I have to say, I suspect you, because in the game today between Preußen Münster and Hertha Berlin, there was a question over whether there should be a penalty to Hertha after Michael Cuisance, the Frenchman, was brought down. It was recommended from the studios in Cologne that the referee should go over and have a look. So a green balaclavaed ultra, a Preußen Münster fan, it turned out, the referee found out when he went over to a blank screen, it basically unplugged the monitor.
What a man.
Extraordinary, really. I mean, this didn't really have any influence on it because it did what should probably happen with VAR in the first place. And so the guy in the studio in Köln went, yes, a penalty, just give the penalty. Yeah. And obviously that would make everything loads quicker if you didn't have the performative going over to the to the monitor. But of course, the guy on the pitch has to make all the decisions, as if the referee is the only one who makes the decisions anyway, because he's aided by his assistants. So why wouldn't he be aided by the people in the studio to make it happen a lot quicker?
Yeah, abolish the whole thing. Thank you very much indeed, Andy, and thank you for the last 3 hours. It's been wonderful. Thanks very much indeed. In our poll, Spurs, 68% of you are pretty sure Spurs are going out of the Champions League. And next here on Talk Sport, it's how to win the World Cup. All that remains for me to say once again is to say thanks for listening. God bless you all and good night.
David, good morning, mate. First
good
of all,
morning, David.
Morning, all. David, here's a quick one for you, mate. I know we're not about talking European football.